Hey guys, welcome to another live show, another live She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel on your way in and making sure that you guys get into that chat and let me know what you guys are thinking and feeling because we do have some transfer news. Obviously, this news broke. Maybe not obviously, because maybe you've been just enjoying life and getting outside and having fun and not focusing on Arsenal. But yesterday, this news about Sesko, which I'll tell you what it is, broke during the season review that me and Diluted we're doing. So this is not necessarily like breaking news, but it has come out within the last like 24 hours or so. And it has, of course, sparked debate online. So anything that sparks debate online, we are going to talk about it here on She Knows Arsenal. I'm going to try to give you guys a full picture, try to see both sides, and give you guys my opinion on kind of how I feel about it. The striker situation at Arsenal, striker conversation at Arsenal has been a very, it's been well talked about over the last 24 months. Let's call it 2 seasons, 2 years, whatever. And I think we can all say without a shadow of a doubt that Arsenal do need to buy a number 9 in this window. They have got to buy a number 9 in this window. They need to get it done. Over the last maybe 2 weeks or so, it's been pretty clear from most of the reports, whether they're super reliable or not, that Arsenal are looking to choose between Victor Gyokeres from Sporting and Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig. The players couldn't be any different. They're both strikers, but they couldn't be any different in style of play, age, experience, where they play, how they play. It couldn't be any different. Both players do present pros and cons, which we will get into that. But I think not winning anything this season and feeling disillusioned and underwhelmed by the season, the feeling amongst a lot of Arsenal fans is that we need something ready to go right now, need somebody ready to hit the ground running because we don't have any time to wait because we need to win a major trophy this season. Let me know if you agree with that in the chat. So here we are. Yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, we had spoken about James McNicholas saying that he felt like any striker that came in would not be necessarily preferred to Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz would still probably start the season and would play probably more minutes than people thought. And I think that was already in the back of people's minds that, Kai Havertz is probably still going to play a big role next season, which a lot of people are not necessarily that into. And I saw people pretty much equating that if Arteta gets Sesko, which was, reportedly his preference, was that would give him some sort of excuse or reason to keep Kai Havertz as the starting number 9 and have a younger player that, is a project so that he can keep his, vanity signing in Kai Havertz, in the starting position. I saw that going around online a lot. And so that is one argument that has been out there. So fast forward to yesterday, and Fabrizio Romano broke the news that Arsenal are in concrete talks now for not for Victor Gyokeres, but for Benjamin Sesko. And there's a lot of things in here, and a lot of things that trouble me going into this next season that don't really have much to do with whether or not Sesko is the finished article or not, but just the way that, we're thinking about things as Arsenal fans. You guys know me. If you don't know me, subscribe to the channel because you're going to get to know me very quickly because I'm going to let you know how I think. Personally, I am not a big Kai Havertz fan. If it was up to me, we would have never purchased him and we would be trying to sell him now. But I'm well adjusted and smart enough to know that that is not going to happen. So am I stupid enough to believe that he's not going to play a role next season? No. But, I don't as many questions as I have about Mikel, and I'm a lot less excited about Mikel now because I do think that the questions are growing whether or not he's the guy to take us over the line. I don't hate him so much that I want Berta to be some sort of villain. I really don't want him to be the Joker to, Mikkel's Batman or whatever you want to call it. I really don't necessarily feel that strongly that I want Berta to stick it to Mikkel, which I feel like is a narrative that is going around. I want Berta to stick it to Mikkel, make him, take these transfers and make him have to deal with players that he doesn't necessarily want because I don't like Mikkel. I feel like that is a very extreme way of thinking about things. And I'm not sure you can be an Arsenal fan and really want the sporting director and the manager to dislike each other or not to work together, right? And so I think when the reports are coming out and they're saying that Gyokeres is Berta's choice and Arteta's choice is Sesko, a lot of people are, I don't want Arteta to get what he wants. I don't want him to get what he wants. I don't know if that's necessarily, I feel like that's borderline toxic. Like I feel like we're veering into borderline toxic. I think what we really want is for Arsenal to have the right players to take us over the line. And I think also if you're somebody that's not necessarily super like Arteta in, or you have questions, or maybe you want him out, I think what you do want is for him to get his players, because ultimately, if he gets his players, then there's no veil of confusion whether or not, the sporting director has sabotaged him. One of the big narratives in this fan base is that Arteta has been sabotaged, and that his hands have been tied behind his back and the sporting director, Edu, has been holding him back. And if he were to get his players, then we would win something, right? And the window is really shaping up to be a window that was meant to happen last summer. We were meant to get Zubamendi last summer. We were meant to get Sesko last summer. If we turn around and get Juan Garcia and Nico Williams, there's really nothing for Mikel to hide behind, like literally at all, right? And so I think if you do have questions about Mikel, you probably do want him to get his players, because then there's no veil of like, that he's, being held back in any sort of way. So listen, taking that all aside, the narratives and agendas and people like being I feel like taking it way too far when it comes to wanting somebody to stick it to Mikel finally because he's this huge enemy or whatever. Getting into the football side of things, Arsenal do need to increase their goal output. They need they need X factor, they need goals, they need somebody up front that's going to give them that. Victor Gyokeres is definitely somebody that has a goal tally that I do like, because I feel like, if I take away the feeling that he's in that Portuguese league, I'm thinking he's going to bang, right? I would feel like, the pros for Gyokeres is he's experienced. He is coming off of a really good season and he's led his team to titles, whether that, it's not the Premier League, but it's the Portuguese league, right? But he's led his team to victory. He scored a shit ton of goals. He's really good at penalties. He scores free kicks. He's all those things that Arsenal would be looking for in a striker. I think the things that probably do go against him is I do think being in the Portuguese league does put a huge asterisk over how effective he really would be in the Premier League. I don't think even as somebody that really likes Gyokeres and can really build up an argument as to why Arsenal should get Gyokeres, I don't think I can totally turn a blind eye to the fact that probably the only striker that has left the Portuguese league and scored at the same rate once they left there is Falcao. That cannot be just shoved aside. It can't be. It cannot be just shoved aside. There's also the con, for some people. This isn't necessarily a super big con for me because I would like us to change our style, but he's not necessarily a plug and play. His style of play is very much so like built around dribbling and a lot of individual stuff and a lot of space and, a lot of touches and things like that and playing on the counterattack. So if you're somebody, we know that we're going to play up against deep blocks. There's no real indication that Gyokeres' style will combine well with ours. And we know that Mikel is not going to change his style for the striker. The striker that he's going to want is going to be somebody that fits neatly into the system that he's built over the last 3 seasons, right? And so there are pros and cons to Gyokeres. And one of my bigger reasons for wanting us to go for Gyokeres instead of Sesko is because I know that there's going to be a big section of this fan base that are not going to be um, they're not going to back Sesko. They are going to actively prey on his downfall to be right. There's going to be a lot of, toxicity at the beginning of the season if we don't start well. And whoever we get, if they do not start well, it's going to get dark. And if I had to think of who might start off better quicker, it's probably going to be the guy that, is a little bit more experienced. So I'm thinking from the standpoint of also like protection and making sure that there's not the Raya situation from the beginning of last season that was totally ridiculous. And it was so bad that you could see that it was affecting him on the pitch. We don't really need that. So Jokeris for me was more of a, even though I do have this thing in the back of my head that's like, what if he doesn't fit our system? What if Mikel doesn't adjust? What if, those goals don't translate? I think Jokeris was the sure bet just because like we're going to be under massive pressure, right? Do I necessarily believe that Jokeris coming in means that Kai Havertz is not going to play? No, because I think Arteta not liking the striker as much or him not being the type of player that he really wanted actually makes it an even bigger possibility that he would not play him as much. And so it's a sticky one. I don't think Gyokeres is as much of a slam dunk as people are making it out to seem. There's a lot of, the only player that would have been a slam dunk for us would be if we had been able to get Isak pretty much, because we know that he would fit in the Premier League. We know that he's going to score a lot of goals. We know a lot about him, but there are a lot of questions around Gyokeres, and there are also questions about Sesko. Now, getting into the actual reporting, Arsenal in talks with RB Leipzig for Sesko. A lot of people are pretending like they actually think it's gonna the fee is gonna be 90 something million just so that they could be totally ridiculous and dramatic. It's not gonna be 90 something million. Use your brain. It's not gonna be that. It's going to be his release clause is 80 million euros, which is 67 million pounds or something around there. And so we probably will land somewhere between, I feel, 67 million pounds and 75 million pounds, somewhere around there, not 93 million pounds. Please use your brain for 5 seconds. We're not going to spend almost 100 million on Sesko, but it's still going to be a good chunk of money, so it's still going to be an investment. And I think Sesko does come into the investment column. He is somebody that the reason why I really like Sesko is because I am on the side of the camp where I do believe that this is the next big number 9, and he does have all the qualities with the right type of development in the right environment to become the best striker in the world. And that is the type of player that I want in my team no matter what. I want that player. I think after what happened with Isak, you could see that even if somebody is not the finished article, they can come to the Premier League and bang. And Arsenal kind of do need, in the past needed the talent to slap them across the face. And some of the arguments against Sesko are some of the same arguments people were using against Isak. He didn't score enough goals. He doesn't look great. He's coming from an inferior league. Blah, 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 blah. Now people are gagging for Isak. So I feel like the main problem with Sesko is that he doesn't necessarily fit the requirement of somebody that is going to lead the line for Arsenal as a starter and score 25 goals this season, which is something that people feel like we really do need because we're under pressure. And I completely understand that. But separate from that, there is no way you could have watched Sesko at all and think that this guy is a fucking bum. There's just no way. People that are saying that he's not good and I hate him and he's terrible and all this, just you either didn't watch him or you just don't want him because he's young and needs a little bit of development. So I love the player. I really do love the player, guys. And this is probably not what people want to hear because, we are in such like a negative kind of like cloud right now, but I really do think that this is Isak 2.0. And the only reason why I wouldn't want Sesko is because we didn't end up getting Isak. And now that we've kind of let it go for too long, now we have to take a different option. But there's nothing in my mind that feels like in the next 2 to 3 seasons that Gyokeres is going to be better than Sesko. Like I view Gyokeres very much so as like an Ollie Watkins or somebody that's going to be kind of like steady and give you the goals, but he's not going to be anything particularly special in the overall. But I do think Sesko is the type of player that is going to be special, and will be like an Isak. And so it's going to be hard for me to pretend like I think this player is shit just because I don't want Havertz to play. And that's essentially what it comes down to. Is I'm not going to lie and say that I think that Sesko is shit, because I just really do not want Havertz starting next season. I really do not think that player should be at Arsenal. I really can't. I can't do it, but I do totally understand the reluctancy to get behind it, because he is a potential, he is an investment, he's not the finished article. But equally, not being the finished article doesn't mean that you can't contribute. And a combination of Havertz and Sesko is going to get you 25 goals a season. And so, yeah, I totally understand it. But man, that first chance that he misses, I really do. I feel for him, because I do feel like Arsenal fans just do not have the ability to put their agenda aside for one moment and like be realistic. Like, this player is going to miss chances, and it's just, that's pretty much one of the only reasons why I really wanted Gyokeres, is because I felt like the fan base would be a little bit more lenient to the missed chances and the adaptation time. There's going to be no leniency, and so it could get dark. But there's the other side of the coin where I'm like, but we could have another, an Isak on our hands. So I don't know if I'm too upset. I don't know. It's tough, so yeah, but enough from me. Saida says he's going to be under so much pressure. Michael says, I've wanted Sesko since last summer. I feel that Arsenal may get both Sesko and Gyokeres, though. Going back to this, I actually think that, he will be under pressure when he plays, but ultimately what the actual scenario is going to be is that people are going to be extra, extra, extra negative about Kai Havertz, because he's going to be starting. That's actually what it's going to be. It's not just going to be about Sesko when he plays. It's going to be about when Kai Havertz plays. The introduction of Sesko has, I think, it has an implication on Sesko, but it has an even bigger implication on Kai Havertz, because the main reason why people don't want Sesko and can't get behind it is not necessarily that I think they actually believe that he's a shit player, is because it means retroactively that Kai Havertz is going to start next season. And so I think the player that's actually going to be under the most duress and going to be under the most scrutiny is going to be Kai Havertz. So Jonathan says, not even a big chance. That first touch, Jess, exactly. I like that we're probably going to get it done early. This feels like a deal that's going to get done pretty quickly. And so he'll be able to come on preseason early and kind of get some of those early jitters out. But the way that, people were actually watching the preseason MLS skills challenge and making fail comps of Kai Havertz in that, it is going to get dark. I know this fan base like the back of my hand. I know it like the back of my hand. There are going to be people preying on his downfall and making fail comps, and Arsenal fans are going to be doing that, because it's more important to be right than to support a player that once he's going to have to, we're going to have to put a little bit. It's different than Kai. Kai failed at Chelsea and doesn't fill any of the requirements that we needed, and he's old enough. It's like, yeah, like that people were asking for love and tender care for him, whatever the fuck, I don't care. But for a 21-year-old, yeah, we're going to have to get behind this guy. Because it could get dark. Z says, Leipzig have told Sesko in talks this week that they are looking for a quick sale and he can leave as soon as possible. Leipzig, no, the North London club remain interested, but there have been no further talks. This is coming from Charlie Wyatt. The situation is complicated because Arsenal are looking at both Sesko and Gyokeres. Arsenal could even prioritize trying to sign an in-demand 70 million rated Gyokeres, meaning Mikel Arteta's search for a new striker could turn into a saga and Sesko might have to wait. I don't know about this reporting because I don't know who Charlie Wyatt is, but he's from The Sun. I tend to feel like Fabrizio would probably have better information than him, but we shall see. Ornstein still has been very quiet, so we don't know. But yeah, I don't know who Charlie Wyatt is, and Fabrizio Romano versus Charlie Wyatt feels a little bit, whatever. But yeah, not really. I don't know. it's the sun, so. Double says, see what I mean? Arteta wants Sesko, so fans like you say he's young, give him time instead of a proven striker who leaves no excuses. I mean, Arteta could also want Sesko because he missed out on Isak. I think it's not so he can manipulate fans like me to say, oh, he's young and needs time. If there's anybody in this fan base that is not under the veil of the Arteta cult, it's me. So he's not fooling me or bringing in Sesko so that I can be manipulated. It could also be the case that Arteta wants the player that is probably going to end up being better. And unfortunately, like, no matter, I just don't see a world where Gyokeres in the next 2-3 seasons is anything other than somebody that people want to move on. So he's a short-term fix. Sesko is a long-term fix, and I think Arteta just doesn't want to repeat the same mistake that he did with Isak. Because again, a lot of this is really, really, really similar to what happened with Isak. Isak was about 70 million pounds from Sociedad to Newcastle. And it was a player that he only had 4 goals. And I'm pretty sure you were probably one of the people that were sitting there saying, yeah, but he only has 4 goals, so he's probably shit. How long is it going to take him to get up to speed? Because the Prem is just so fast in such a difficult league that he couldn't ever get up to speed from La Liga. So I don't necessarily feel like Arteta's just getting Sesko to make sure that he can keep his cult happy. Like, let's be realistic. Let's get out of the mindset of like Arteta is. I feel like some of you guys look at Arteta and you see the Joker or whatever TV villain, and you think he's like actively concocting plans to sabotage Arsenal from winning. I don't think it's that dark or that deep. I think he wants Sesko because he fits our system better. He's probably a better option long-term than Gyokeres, and it's not because he wants the shittier player to keep his cult from putting pressure on him or whatever. It's not that, it's really not that. You guys be honest with yourselves. Like, come on. It's probably just Arteta probably also just doesn't feel the level of pressure that you guys think he does. So he doesn't feel like he's under pressure to pick somebody that doesn't fit his system and is a short-term fix. I think that could be the case as well. Foxy says Isak cost us just over 60 million bargain. Omizia says Romano rarely has info on Arsenal transfers in the last 3 seasons. It's been Ornstein. Yeah, but he's probably more reliable than Charlie Wyatt. Let's be honest. Social Join says the Sesko thing stinks of Nunez. This is interesting because I actually think Sesko is actually probably more like Isak than Nunez. Gyokeres has more of an opportunity to be a Nunez because Nunez actually was a player that scored a shit ton of goals. He scored a lot of goals in the Portuguese league and came with a very heavy price tag and a lot of hype and all that, and pretty much flopped in the Prem because his goals didn't translate from the Portuguese leagues to the Prem. So I actually don't think Sesko his situation is actually nothing like Nunez is. Actually, Gyokeres' situation is much more congruent to his. So yeah, interesting that you said that, but I actually think it's different in every way, shape, and form. Like, it's nothing similar whatsoever. His situation is much more similar to Isak's, where because even with Isak, his first season at Newcastle, he played 22 games and he scored 10 goals. That wasn't anything to shout about. But then the next 2 seasons, he scored 20 goals. And he was a player that no Arsenal fans really wanted because his goal tally didn't line up with what they wanted. And so they couldn't see the foresight. And also the club didn't have the foresight. We ended up missing out on a world-class player, and now we want him. So there's actually no similarity between Nunez and Sesko at all. The only problem with Sesko is his readiness now. That's it. That is a big concern, but it's not the same as Nunez, who he had like a shit ton of goals. Like, hello. Senny says Havertz scores in this team. I think Gyokeres will be just fine. Victor says Arteta wants Sesko so he can fool the YouTubers like you. I'm so be so fucking for real right now. Like, he's not fooling me into anything. I feel like I'm giving a very clear picture of what the concerns are for both. But I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say that I think Sesko is shit. I really don't. I think he's actually going to become one of the best, if not the best striker in the world. So, yeah, it's not like we're going out there and getting Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I totally understand. My only concern is more about the pressure he's gonna be under and, the pressure that also Kai is gonna be under. That's it. That's pretty much what it is. And also, it all also depends on what else we get. If you get a left winger, that is a top quality player like a Rodrigo or something like that, I really do think that it softens the blow per se of getting a less ready striker. But if you don't get a left wing or you get somebody that's raw as well, maybe like a Gittins or something, I could see people being like very, thing about that. So I think there's a lot of different factors, but I think you're kidding yourself if you think Gyokeres is a 100% slam dunk, and you're also kidding yourself if you think Sesko is a 100% slam dunk. They both have very clear pros and cons. The main positive for Gyokeres for me is that he'll probably deal with the pressure better and be able to lead the line right away. That's probably the main thing. Sesko's not a bum though, you know? Joe says, Watkins, Sesko, Rodrigo, and Zubimendi is honestly a really good summer. Mohammed says, just how would you feel if we add Sesko and Mbomo and keep the rest of the attack? I would take Mbomo. I think adding somebody that has Premier League experience and can score 20 goals a season, again, lessens the blow of having somebody that's probably just not as ready as you'd want them to be. I do think you have to bring in somebody else to complement Sesko, which is why I put up the poll asking which player would complement the Sesko signing best, because it cannot just be Sesko, Zubimendi, and a goalkeeper. You need to add a left wing or another striker or something. Sean says if Arteta can get Havertz and Marino to score goals in this team, then he can definitely get Sesko scoring goals. Nuances of Fate says all to be benched by Havertz. Bulgarian says Mbomo for 50 million would be a smart deal. I agree. The Arsenal perspective says Sesko must be surrounded by a number one target winger and creative midfielders. Callie says if he folds under pressure, it will tell you everything you need to know that this kid will be a failure. If he folds under pressure, it will tell you everything you need to know, and this kid will be a failure. So if he's not the finished article and isn't perfect at 21 coming to Arsenal in his first season, then he's going to be a failure. Are you guys listening to yourselves? Are you guys actually listening to yourselves? I mean, no offense, Callie Gunnar, but being 21 and coming to Arsenal and not being perfect in your first season does not seal your fate as a failure. It just doesn't. That's not how football works. I think people are going to be desperate to, if Sesko does come, to be right and stamp him as a failure if he doesn't hit the ground running. But again, even Isak didn't hit the ground running. And he didn't end up being a failure. So I don't know what you're saying. I think basically you don't want Sesko and you're just saying things like you're saying things that doesn't actually mean anything. Let's see. Diallo says, "Give me Sesko and a sneaky Watkins, and then I'm Coochie." I think. Do you mean you're Gucci? Because I don't think you mean Gucci. Thank you so much for your super chat. And Diallo says, "By the way, with those two, we also need a starting left winger. There is no way that not getting a starting left winger can be an option. There needs to be somebody that." Comes in and adds more creativity and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I really do think that we need to make sure that we finish the job 100%. Make sure that you finish the job, make sure you bring in the left wing, you bring in Sesko, fair enough. Just make sure the left winger also is a starter, top level player. But I wouldn't mind bringing in Ollie Watkins for like super cheap either. Like they're in financial trouble, Aston Villa, throw them a cheeky little 30 million and say, take it or leave it. Grab Ollie Watkins, make sure you have somebody ready to go. Grab a Mbomo. You could do the same thing with him. He can play false nine for Arsenal, like a starting front line of Mbomo, Saka, and like a Williams would eat down. So it all depends on what else they bring into the fold. So, and I do believe that we are going to bring other players into the fold. So yeah. Diallo says, typo, guys, please allow me some grace. No, you're going to be coochie. That's what you said. That's what you said. Adatile says, Sesko Havertz 2-man has stupidly high downside. Need a left wing who can cross the ball. I don't think we're going to play a 2-man. I don't know why people are saying this like, well, Havertz and Sesko are going to play together. I don't see a way. And I even tried to think of it yesterday because I was like, how is Arteta going to make sure that all his favorites play at the same time? There's really no way to make it happen because even if you play the diamond, somebody is going to miss out. He's not going to bring in his prodigal son, drop his captain, or drop his marquee signing. So like Havertz probably just will start at the 9 and then Sesko will play the other minutes, and come in and, play whatever minutes that's Havertz doesn't play. There's no way we're going to move to a 4-4-2 or a diamond or anything. Nuances says, a man's going to be coochie. Can't leave this one down. Coochie. That's going to go in with goosebumps. Grubel says, Sesko Havertz 2-man is the funniest pairing in football history. The Arsenal Perspective says, there's no time machine. It's not the late 90s, early 2000s. We will not be playing a 4-4-2, guys. Give up on that thought. I don't really see. I think it's like, if we play a 4-4-2, if there's more strikers, then that's going to make us more attacking. I don't actually think that's true. So yeah. So, like Fabrizio was saying, over the last 24 hours, there's been contact made with RB Leipzig to find out the value of Sesko. Talks are progressing. So, like I said, I don't think this Charles Wyatt person is necessarily somebody we need to be listening to. There's been quite a few low-level, like kind of not so great sources that have said that it's going to be Gyokeres, but only the really reliable people have said it's going to be Sesko. So, I'm going to go with the idea that it's going to be Sesko. So. Yeah. And then let's see what Ben Jacobs is saying. I don't know if he has spoken on his thing. So, no, I don't think he has. I think he's spoken about it like on a channel or something, but not on his thing. So I haven't seen anything yet. So yeah. Ben the Waffler Jacobs, Victor says, people want change. So they think 4-4-2, more strikers, more goals. The formation isn't the issue. Yeah, I really don't think that we need to change the formation. I think we need to change how we operate within that system. We've been playing 4-3-3 for time now. It's been a while since we played anything else. And in every single season, it is operated differently based on Arteta's tactics. So, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the formation that needs to change. I just think we need some more firepower up front, and Arteta needs to, stop being so fucking rigid and let his players move around. There's a comp on YouTube that I think the title is When Arteta Ball Works, It's Beautiful, or When Arteta Ball Happens, or something about When Arteta Ball something. And it's from 2020 to 2023, which doesn't even really include, it doesn't really include this season. It includes but multiple seasons. And to certain extents, like sometimes we haven't been able to do it because, we haven't had the right personnel. But when we want to play good football, it is more than within our grasp, whether Chambers is in the team, whether Lacazette is there, whether Bellerin has been there, whether Pepe or Aubameyang has been there, whether it's been Havertz and Declan Rice, whether it's been Jesus and Zinchenko. It's a choice. This club is actively making a choice not to play good football right now. So, we can play in a 4-3-3. It doesn't matter. We just need to play it differently. Social Join says, I don't see it. I just see another Havertz that can shoot. Good luck with Sesko. Hope he proves us naysayers wrong, but it's going to be rough for man. I'm trying to understand, what have you watched from him that looks like Havertz? Because he's way faster than Havertz. He was the fastest player in the Euros. He, like you said, he can actually shoot. He's actually much better on the ball and more agile than Havertz because he can dribble and Havertz cannot. His box movement is better. Like, I'm trying to understand what is similar to Havertz outside of both of them being 6'5". I'm concerned that we're not really watching the player. It's just he's not the finished article, and I don't get it. Like, I'm not sure, like, I don't get it. But maybe I'm seeing it completely different, but I don't see very many similarities between Havertz and Sesko. You know, like Havertz is not a striker. Krubel says Havertz has played left back for Germany before. I want to see some madness next season uh before the WH. Okay. Foxy says it's because Sesko is tall, like Havertz. Um, Social Join says it ain't about the players, it's how we play and the system fetish. Marino went up top and we still tried to use him like Havertz. Leopards don't change their spot. So you don't like the system. So that doesn't have anything to do with Sesko and Havertz being exactly the same. There's not a single player that's going to come into this team and Arteta is not going to use the striker the same way. I think that's the biggest red flag for Gyokeres is that do you actually, if you know that he's what, no matter what striker is in there, we're going to kind of utilize them in the same ways. We're going to play, we have small spaces. We're going to try to get crosses into the box, whatever. They're going to hold it up and do 1-2s and all that kind of stuff. If you know that, and both Marino and Havertz played it similarly, then why would you want a striker that doesn't even his whole style of play doesn't do that all? Like, do you actually think Arteta is going to change their system to play like Sporting? He's not. So I feel like you want the player that can probably play at the maximum in the system that Arteta has, and Sesko has a better opportunity to do that. My biggest concern about Gyokeres, outside of the fact that the goal's not transferring, is I don't actually believe Arteta is going to change his system to suit him, and so that could actually cause bigger problems than having a younger player that needs development but could actually plug and play into his system. So neither one of those are perfect, but Gyokeres presents some issues because he is not somebody that plays in anything similar to what we do, you know? J News says, haha, not with our board. It's a dream. You guys talking to each other. Adatile says, I would also say this, please, for the love of God, do not give him the number 14. I agree with that. Do not give him the number 14. The Arsenal Perspective says, I hear that some worry that Sesko doesn't put his weight around like he could, but he definitely has the capability to do so. Imagine him up against Magalhaes in training. He will get him up to speed. I also think that there's a tendency to think the most negative thing in the world is going to happen. And I understand that as well, that, because we're in a negative moment, it's very easy to slip into everything is going to go bad. Everyone we sign is going to fail. Everything we're doing is wrong. Everything is like, and I don't necessarily feel like that's the best way to think about it. I haven't seen very many people in the chat that don't want Sesko that are not thinking the absolute most negative thing, most worst case scenario, that we're going to get Sesko. He's going to be the worst player in the world. He's not going to be able to trap a ball. He's not going to score a goal. He's going to be shit. He's not going to get any better. Arteta's not going to be able to use him. He's not going to do this. Instead of, what if he does do well? What if he does develop? If he can make Marino and Havertz look decent, what could he do with somebody that has pace, actual ball striking, number 9, actual number 9 qualities, good box movement, great aerially? Like, what could he do with somebody that's actually an actual striker? The only issue I have with Sesko is the time that it's going to take for him to develop. That is it. It's just the most negative thing in the world is going to happen. It's like, I don't get it. I do understand the throwing his weight around thing. He is going to have to improve upon that. And probably the best scouting report that I saw in Sesko and was the most realistic on him, it wasn't about blowing smoke up his ass or saying he was the best player in the world. He said Sesko has all the things that you would want, but he also needs to develop those things. So he's a player that you can see that he has all the things you would want in a number 9, and you have seen them for Leipzig. It's not like we're pulling shit out of our ass and saying, yeah, he's a great ball striker, but we've never seen it, or he has great box movement and we've never seen it, or he is a good dribbler and we've never seen it. It's just not consistent, and he needs to develop those things to be more consistent. So that's actually the issue that we have with Sesko. It's not that he doesn't have all the qualities, they are all there. It's about getting them going consistently and at a high level. That is the development curve for him. It's not about Arteta helping him developing his goal, his ball striking, having Arteta having to get him to understand where to be in the box. It's about getting those things consistently. To me, I'd rather have a player that has shown that he can do those things and just needs to develop them and do them consistently than somebody that doesn't have those qualities at all. And we're trying to force him to be something that he's not. I think Arteta, one of the main things that concern me is that a lot of times he has players that don't have those qualities and tries to force it on them instead of just making what they do exponentially better. And that's something that he can do easily with Sesko because you don't have to squint to see it. And if a lot of you guys really do want somebody with a lot of pace, this guy is fucking rapid as well. Like he is fast. So one of the things that we really need is pace up front. You definitely have it with him. So I get the negative parts about it, but the negative parts it's a very clear one is the readiness. That's definitely there. Um, Arsenal Perspective says Sesko is not Andy Carroll 2.0. Victor says the Canon podcast do a great scouting on him. They say he's 6'5", but he doesn't know it yet. Arteta is good at coaching players into dual monsters. Juice says the season really deflated fans. Most of the fan base don't know if to stick or twist. And I think we do feel like a traumatized group of people. And I can say that very confidently because I also am traumatized. I tend to think, what is the worst case scenario? So I can sense when people are thinking the worst case scenario about Sesko is that he's going to be the worst player on the planet. Like, you know what I mean? But this is not a player that I can doom because I actually do rate him. So it's going to be hard for me not to be excited if we do actually end up signing him. I'm just concerned about the level of vitriol he's going to have to deal with because he's not the finished article and people projecting upon him and almost hoping for his downfall to be right. Sending him nonsense and being assholes because we've seen it before with Raya. We've seen it with Kai. And then also the negativity that it's going to come for Kai because he's going to be the starter. So, yeah, I hear it. I hear it. And I just hope that Arsenal underpin this signing if it does happen with a top left wing. I think that can mitigate some of the stress around readiness and making sure that we actually improve the front line the way that we want to, you know. But I totally hear it. I'm not saying that it's not justified. I'm just saying that some of it I do feel like is more built around just being negative for negative sake rather than actual points. Nuances says we are traumatized fan base, hence the Stockholm syndrome some fans have with Arteta. Well, I don't have the Stockholm syndrome. Uta says it's just Hoyland. He ruined it for all the young strikers. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially United fans are probably the funniest because I think they want somebody else to have made the mistake and bought a Hoyland, but Sesko and Hoyland to me are not similar. And also Hoyland went into probably one of the worst environments he could have possibly went into. And Sesko's not coming into a terrible environment. He's going to be very much so cushioned with a lot of players that can kind of like help him. He's not going to be in an environment that's under fire, So I get the trying to find it's probably going to be like Hoyland because another striker that came from somewhere else shit the bed and is horrible. So I get it, but I kind of feel like it's going to be more like Isak where he might not have the best opening season, not meaning that he's going to not contribute anything, but he might score 10 to 15 goals off the bench. And then Havertz will have to make up the rest, or they'll be kind of combining together to score the goals that we need. But then that next season, he's going to fucking explode. Let's see. Double says fans like you are not healthy. I'm definitely healthy, but the fan base is on the verge of meltdown next season, and you're happy with having a 20-year-old kid be the boy that takes us to CRPL. Unfair on him. I just know that when you're saying something like fans like you are not healthy, and also the rest of this comment just shows me that you didn't listen to a single thing that I said. Like, you have not, if you listen, you didn't listen for comprehension, you listened just to just spout out whatever you feel. No offense to you at all, but I didn't say I am happy to have a 20-year-old take us to Premier League or Champions League. He's quite literally not gonna be doing that. It's gonna be Havertz. I think people are thinking that he's gonna start every single game. He's not. It's gonna be Havertz. So I'm not being unfair to him. I'm actually being very fair to him. It's not going to be the people that are being unfair to him are gonna be the ones that are spouting negativity and shitting on him and sending him nasty messages and saying he's shit because he's a 21-year-old that's not perfect. So you didn't listen. You didn't listen. Just say you don't want him. Just say you don't want him. That's as clear as it is. But saying I'm not healthy, and I'm doing something to Sesko by wanting him to lead the line, he's not going to lead the line. It's going to be fucking Havertz. So, like, just actually listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's no negatives. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying he's going to score 25 goals, or my expectation of him is not going to be to score 25 goals because I'm not ridiculous, but I don't know. I feel like you guys are not listening, and you're sending comments every 5 seconds, which you can't possibly be writing comments and listening at the same time. If you're writing comments every 2 seconds, you're not listening, so thank you for your commentary, but you're not making sense. Jetter says, do you not think that's a problem to still have Kai Havertz starting? There's no guarantee that if he bought Gyokeres, by the way, that Gyokeres would be starting too. James McNicholas said whoever we sign is not going to start. So, and Kai Havertz is going to start the season. So I hear what you're saying, but there's no guarantee that he wouldn't be starting. And I've already kind of said that I think that Havertz is going to have a lot of pressure on him because he's going to be leading the line. But, it kind of is what it is. But now having Havertz and having Sesko, if you know that Havertz is probably going to score, I would say if I had to make a tally for him right now for next season in the Prem, he scored what 9 goals in the Premier League this season and missed 4 months, right? So I think he scored around 15 goals, right? So if you add that to what you think Jesus, or like Jesus and Nketiah have never been really that great at bringing in goals anyway, but if you actually have Sesko there, you could make an argument that you're going to get 25 goals from your strikers in the Premier League at least, so I think it's going to be a kind of a combination of the two, having to come up with the goals that you would need from like an Isak type of player, so it's not just going to be about Kai Havertz starting. I don't want Kai Havertz starting. I'm not saying I do. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I think Sesko is shit. And that's my main point, is that, yes, he's not ready. And that means that Havertz is going to start. But it's not like Sesko is going to come here and not be able to contribute anything. It's not like he's not going to get, 10 goals and be able to add those to whatever we're doing. It's not like he's not going to be able to trap a ball. That's all I'm really saying. Like, I do have concerns about Havertz starting. I prefer him not starting. But the reality is, no matter who's coming in, he probably was going to start anyway, so yeah. Keenan says, I think Havertz will hit 15 and Sesko will hit 8 goals. It's going to be a tough season. Callie says, Jess, what's your idea of a good season? What should the team accomplish next season? They have to win. They have to win the Premier League or the Champions League. I think that's the only thing at this stage that we need, Yo-Yo says next season, every attacker, including advanced midfielders, must break double figures in all comps, no excuses. I agree with Yo-Yo. I was doing the numbers yesterday, especially after the Sesko news came out, and I wish I'd brought my notebook in here with me, but essentially I had actually, let me find it. Give me 2 seconds. Because I knew when I did the show, you guys were going to be talking about goal, like how many goals are we going to be able to score with this realistically? Um, so in the Prem, because I'm just thinking about the Prem right now, is we know we need to score around 100 goals. I would say that's the sweet spot. You want to score about 100 goals in the Prem. And so essentially, I had all of our defenders combined at around 23 goals. That's considering like Gabrielle scores quite a few. Everybody else scores like maybe one or two, keeping it like real realistic. White scoring two, Saliba scoring two, something like that. And then I had like Odegaard and Rice have to hit double figures. They have to hit double figures. Odegaard has to hit like 10 goals. Rice has to hit 10 goals in the Prem. And then I had Havertz at 15. I had Saka at 15. I had a new left wing at 10. Martinelli at like 8. Trossard at like 5. Ethan at like 5. And all of that together was like somewhere around 100 goals, and that didn't add anything from Sesko. So it does put more pressure on players like Odegaard and Rice to get into double figures. So without even adding Sesko goals at all, there, you could say that Odegaard and Rice could actually score a couple less. And if Sesko scores like 10 goals, then you still make 100 goals. So that's a perfect scenario. But to me, that's kind of what we've been doing. And I kept it on the low side. So yeah, Odegaard and Rice have to get around at least 8 to 10 goals each to mean that if Sesko doesn't score any goals whatsoever, we're going to still score about 100 goals. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So I was trying to get to 100 goals without Sesko even having to score any. So I think we're well within that. It also puts pressure on the new left wing, so new left wing has to come in and score goals. Saka also has to score like 15 goals, but that's what we should be requiring. I think there's no reason why a new left winger and Saka should not be scoring. They should not be in double figures, and then somebody like Trossard, who consistently comes up with goals, you're going to expect him to get 6 to 8 goals or, whatever. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I don't think there's a reason why we wouldn't make at least 100 goals, so we'll see. Zach says 90 goals is enough to win. 100 is overkill. I was just being safe. I'm just being safe. Nuances says 80 million for a striker. We expect less than 15 goals for as well. It's not 80 million though. It's 65. So I get what you're saying, but I'm not saying we expect less than 15 goals from. I think we are hoping that he at least gets like 10 goals. And if he gets more than that, that'd be great. I think you're still thinking way too short term. When you buy Sesko, whether we like it or not, besides the fact that we need to win the Premier League, you are not buying Sesko thinking that he's going to be the finished article and scoring 20 goals tomorrow. So anybody who is, but we're spending 65 million on Sesko to score only 10 goals. Wow, that doesn't make any sense. You are spending 65 million on Sesko with the prediction that he's going to be the best striker in the world in the next 2 to 3 seasons. That's what you're spending 65 million on, not, well, you're only going to, like, as soon as you buy Sesko, it's not like buying, it's not like buying Declan Rice for 100 million. The expectation for Declan Rice is he's like the finished article. You are spending 100 million on a player that you expect to help you win titles or to win you something almost instantaneously. Sesko is an investment. And whether you like it or not, that doesn't change anything. It is an investment. Just like when Newcastle bought Isak for 60 million, that was an investment in a player that they knew over the next 2 to 3 seasons would be a world-class striker. It's not different at all. 88 miles per hour says Sesko doesn't come in and score like Salah. He will take a while to peak. Nico says best striker in the world. Yes, best striker in the world. Johnny says, well, Tottenham paid 60 million on Richarlison and he's shit, 60 million on Solanke and he's mid. Definitely under Sesko. 65 million is not that bad price for a team like Arsenal, who's better regarded. Aha says, Hey Jess, have you seen the rumors that we may be going for two strikers, Sesko and Watkins? And would you rather do that or get one striker and one attacking midfielder? We'll get into that in a second. Adedayo says Saka needs to put in higher XG situations rather than always having to create. I do think that like the expectation for all of our attackers, including our attacking mids, has got to increase. I think this season has been a struggle, and so I can give them a little bit of pass this season because of the injuries and all that kind of stuff. But next season, with a full rest and a good preseason, Declan Rice, I think, what did he have, like 7 goals this season or something like that? And he had a slow start to the season. And I'm just talking in the Premier League right now. No, he had 4 goals and 7 assists, but the season prior he had 7 goals and 8 assists, and he was kind of good throughout. So he's gonna need to bump that up by like a couple. Odegaard needs to at least get somewhere between his 2022 form and his 2023 form, somewhere between there. We thought that Saka was gonna make his, was gonna make his big season, right? Because he scored 4. Okay, so Saka in 2022-2023 scored 14 goals and got 11 assists. Last season, he scored 16 goals and got 9 assists. This season, he had 6 goals and 10 assists. So the goals dried up, but his assists are pretty consistent. So if he can go back to his goal scoring form of the last 2 seasons, then we're fine. The reality is, even if he got Gyokeres and he scored 25 goals a season, it really does not mean that everybody else can take a season off. Everybody else is still going to have pressure on them to score a lot more goals than they did this season and to add that GA to their game. So there's no guarantee that just buying a striker that scores a lot of goals is just going to relieve everybody else of having to do anything. Everybody's going to have to pitch in. Everyone. Saka will make his 30 GA next season. Watch this space. Burmy says the left wing is becoming more and more important. If we sign Sesko for a potential Watkins as a bargain, the left wing is so important. I agree. The Arsenal perspective says Declan gets 20 GA next season. All comps. Watch the space. I agree with that as well. Osman says Holland only wanted to go to City, and they also paid unknown sums off the books. Yo-Yo says Sesko hitting the ground running wouldn't be breaking 20 in the league, but I want him to score more than Jesus, Eddie, Laka ever did. I'm kind of thinking my expectation of Sesko is going to be at least 20 goals, all comps, because I'm going to assume that he's going to be able to score more, like you said, than Eddie or Jesus in a supporting role. And he's also going to score in cups when he plays. So I'm going to go for, if he comes, like 20 goals, in all comps. That's what I'm going for in his first season. Let's see. Get Sesko plus Rodrigo Williams and then Watkins and Bomo in attack. Diallo says, Jess, let's be real. We're going to need 30 GA from Starboy next season. He's our hope. But that's in any team. In any team, even if Lewandowski scored the 30 goals that he scored, that doesn't mean that Rafinha and Lamine Yamal can take the season off. Like, there's no way that, like, bringing in a striker that I think the whole thing with Sesko is that eventually you want him to be like a Lewandowski, or you want him to be, somebody that's going to bring in those 30 goals. But even at that state, like, you're going to need other players to pitch in. So to me, there's just no like way that everybody can just like sit back and say, yeah, but so-and-so is going to score for me. Like, everybody's going to have to come up with something. Surafel says Sesko surprised all the fans. Blaze says, I understand we should have high standards for our players, but Saka had a serious injury. People don't need to forget that. But also, I think something that can supplement Saka, if he doesn't, maybe he gets like the 15 goals or whatever, or is the arrival of Waneri. I think having somebody like Waneri that is like a natural goal scorer, I think is going to add goals from the bench, that we didn't have before. Because before Ethan, we had players like Emil and Fabio, and they weren't really giving us the goals off of the bench, but Ethan is a player that we know next season is definitely going to get more goals. He is a goal score, and he scored like what? He had like 4 goals in the Prem and like more in the Champions League. Ethan had 4 goals in the Prem. So he can easily like get double that next season or just get more in general, you know? So yeah, I think there's if people do what they're supposed to, they will score goals and will have enough. But it just puts pressure on players to actually do their job, you know, and we should put pressure on them to do their job, you know. Arsenal Perspective says, which position does Ethan play next season? Can he get more central? Can he push Odegaard? I think he's going to play mostly right wing, if I'm honest. Adatile says, no Rice replacement. Why are we not panicking? No Rice replacement. Why are we not panicking? What about Rice? Why will we panic? 88 miles per hour. I said, I'd take Lewandowski for a 1-year loan. Yo-Yo says left wing is critical now. This will finally unburden Saka to a lesser extent, Odegaard to permit them to be facilitators first. And yeah, I think the left wing needs to be creative, I think, more than anything. I think Saka has built up enough goal scoring like acumen to be somebody that we can expect to be like our Rafinha. Like to me, the blueprint is Barcelona. If we can get to as close to them as possible, that would be great. And when I say close to them, I mean the dynamic. Lewandowski, you know, scores a shit ton of goals. And I think we're trying to project Sesko to be that player, and then Havertz can go. And then you have somebody like Rafinha. I actually think Saka is more of the Rafinha, and somebody like a Nico Williams would be more like a Lamine Yamal, more creative player that scores goals, but is more of the creator. Or even Rodrigo would be somebody like that too. So you need a creator that scores goals and a goal scorer that creates, and then a bagsman. You know, so I think that's the way to go forward. But you know, it's not perfect right now, obviously, because we need to get the left wing. And if you bring in Sesko, that still means that him and Havertz will share time, but we'll get there eventually. Waylon says, does a front three of Saka, Sesko, and Kudus win us the league or Champions League? I mean, Kudus doesn't even play left wing, so probably not, because he doesn't play in that position, but he's either a left-sided midfielder or a right-sided midfielder or right wing. So I don't know, but like going with the actual players that we're linked with, if you add a Rodrigo or a Nico Williams plus Sesko, Havertz, because not just Sesko, I still feel like people are thinking about it too simplistically. Next season, if you buy Rodrigo, it's not going to be Rodrigo, Sesko, Saka. It's going to be Rodrigo, Sesko, Havertz, Saka. You know, so does that win you the league? I think that has more than enough goals there and creativity and profiles to get you close to where you want to be. The Easter Ripper says, yes, I'm fine with Rodrigo or Williams. The Arsenal Perspective says, Jess, do you think we will get all the personnel signings we need to address this summer? I am looking for a minimum of 8-10 rated window. I don't know. You know, they've let us down before, so I'm cautiously optimistic. Mm, this just in from Ben Jacobs. Victor Gyokeres and Benjamin Sesko are both targets for Arsenal, as you're not going to go all in on just one target. Many clubs are competing for the same players, so backup plans needed. Berta has taken some time to understand why Sesko was the first choice before his time and now agrees. Let's see if this contact with Leipzig will lead to a bid. It will be one or the other, not both. So we won't get both Gyokeres and Sesko, which makes sense. So yeah, let's see. But yeah, in terms of the rated window, they've let us down in the past, so I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm hoping that, you know, somebody like you know, Berta is going to make sure that we get everything that we need and we won't leave the window feeling stupid. But, you know, I do think, like, I'm feeling like we're going to get the left wing. And I'm just praying that we get it. I think I'll be happy with Zubamendi, a winger, a striker, and whatever else. Well, Zubamendi, the striker, the winger, and whatever else. I'd love for us to push for another midfielder, but I'm not really optimistic that that's going to happen. I think a perfect window would be with the attacking midfielder as well. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't have like a real answer for it because I don't know the future. Um, but you can't be talking about goosebumps and thinking excitement and the window's going to be great and then miss out on the left wing. So they need to get that done. O'Malley says Rodrigo or Williams would definitely move the needle. I agree. Um, uh, David says, I believe a good left wing, Nico or Rodrigo, would also elevate Martinelli, even if he comes off of the bench. Yeah. I think we need more competition for places and for people to feel the fire under their ass. I think good players, iron sharpens iron and all that nonsense. So I think it would be really good to have some players come in and push for places. That's why I even think an attacking mid would help because it would mean that it would keep Odegaard honest. It would also keep Rice honest. I would like somebody that can play on both sides, that can play right right attacking mid and left attacking mid. Somebody like an El Canus at the very, very, very least, because there's no reason not to snap somebody like that up. Premier League proven, good, talented player, can play on both sides, can pick a pass, 22 million. I don't think there's really any excuse not to get the attacking mid. And it just keeps everybody honest. I think that's why the defense is better than the attack, really, too, is because for the longest time, really, our attackers have pretty much had very secure spots. Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka have all been pretty secure. They knew nobody was going to start in front of them. There was no fighting for your position. Since Kai has come in, he's never had to fight for his position either. It's just as soon as they put him up top, there was nobody else that could potentially, push him for the spot. So competition for places will help us. John says, I see Gyokeres at Liverpool. Scary, scary times. Lar Doyle says, big up Jess. If Sesko fails and only delivers 8 to 12 goals, will there be more money next summer for a different striker? I doubt it. We should have went for Gyokeres. Again, when you buy Sesko, you're taking into account that a first season of 8 to 12 goals is probably not a failure for a young player needing development. That's not going to be a starter. And so we're not going to buy a new striker if the plan for Sesko is for him to be one of the best strikers in the world in the next 2 to 3 seasons. Sesko is not a failure if he scores 8 to 12 goals in his first season at Arsenal coming off of the bench, So I still think that people are just like, it's not like seeping in that Sesko means the first season. It's not a write-off. You expect him to contribute, but actually 8 to 12 goals for Sesko would not be horrendous considering he won't be a starter. And he's young and probably going to need to develop. Again, Isak's first season at Newcastle, he scored 10 goals and nobody was calling him a flop or a failure. So why would Arsenal and Arsenal fans consider Sesko a flop or a failure coming off of the bench for Arsenal and scoring 8 to 12 goals? I don't actually understand what we're talking about here. I think the main objection to Sesko is you want Kai Havertz out of the team and you want somebody that's going to score 25 to 30 goals that's like already ready to go, but if you buy Sesko, you can't look at it the same as Gyokeres. If Gyokeres scores 8 to 12 goals, he's definitely a failure because the expectation would be that he comes in and bangs. The expectation of Sesko is not going to be that he comes in and he's perfect, So yeah, I don't know why we're thinking about it. It's weird. I'm thinking about it like that. It's strange, Rodney says people need to chill on the Sesko. Fraterai says what we can't afford to do as AFC fans is to descend into the spiral of negativity. Sesko will be a piece of a bigger puzzle. We got to be balanced. There is no balance. There's no balance, Fraterai. It's just he's shit. He's shite. So yeah, John says, but 8 to 12 goals is a bad season considering on the phase that we're in and how fans are now impatient. It's not because Sesko won't be the starter. So how are you going to say that somebody coming off of the bench is a failure with 8 to 12 goals. The only person that would be failing is Havertz if he doesn't do what he needs to do. He's not the starter, so how is he a failure? I don't get it. I think the thing for you guys is you need to separate what the expectations of Sesko would be based on who he actually is and where he's at in his career, and wanting a different striker altogether. You know, if we were to bring in like if let's put it this way. If Ethan was coming in and, a lot of you guys want him to start over Odegaard, would you not change your expectation of Ethan, or would you expect him to get 15 goals and 15 assists like you do Odegaard? And would Ethan be a failure if he wasn't able to live up to those expectations? I'll tell you right now that you wouldn't. You would expect Ethan to need a little bit of time. You'd give him grace. You'd give him time to get up to speed because you know that he's not going to be perfect right off the bat. So Sesko coming in is no different to me than if Ethan were to have stepped in for Odegaard during that period of time where he probably should have been starting because Odegaard was injured. Our expectations of him wouldn't have been to be Odegaard. It would be Ethan, young player coming from Hale End, playing his first season with real men, so it's not a failure for a player that if you expect, like if you can say with your chest that if Sesko comes in, your expectation of him is 25 to 15 goal or 25 to 30 goals, then fair enough. But to me, that's just setting yourself up for when he doesn't do it. So you could say, I told you so, when that should not be your expectation of a 21-year-old that needs development. If you're saying he's not good enough before he walks in, then why would you expect more than 8 to 12 goals? It doesn't work like that. Now, if Gyokeres comes in, somebody that you guys do think is ready to go, that you do think is the guy, and he doesn't do it, then it's a failure. But you're already saying that Sesko's not good enough, so why would you expect more than like 8 to 12 goals? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. Arteta should have just kept his mouth shut. He's not improving on anything. Jado says, we just blew our third season in a row waiting on this guy, and you're telling me we should be happy with 8 goals? That's not what I said. Did I ever say we should be happy with 8 to 12 goals? Find it. I never said we should be fine or happy with 8 to 12 goals, but the expectation of Sesko would be that he's not the finished article. So the actual difference is you just don't want Sesko because he's not the guy. He's not the guy that you want. He's not a finished article, but your expectation of him and what you want in a striker are two different things. You can't sit there and say, well, I know he needs development and he's not, the finished article. And then when he inevitably ends up being that, saying it's a failure, it doesn't make sense to me. It does, like the way you're thinking about it doesn't make sense. I never said you should be okay with it. I never said you should be happy with it, but that's going to be the expectation. The expectation of Sesko, which is why you guys are losing your heads, is that he's a development striker or he needs some time. Doesn't make sense. I feel like you guys are weird. Like, I don't feel like you guys are, I feel like it's you're trying to figure out a way to be negative before you actually need to be negative. Just relax. You haven't even signed him yet. 88 miles per hour says people are desperate for their negative projections to materialize. It's exactly what I'm saying. Adatile says, who says we're guaranteed a trophy anyway? David Ball says, more important than the raw goal numbers is the impact of 8 to 12 goals. If those goals secure 3 points, turn those 1-0 games into 2-0 games we ended up drawing this year, 1-1, then this doesn't really matter. And I think that's why, although I wish we were in a situation where we could get an Isak, because I think the ideal situation would be Isak, because that he's going to get you 12, 20, 25 plus goals, just him by himself. And he's going to have the X factor and all that kind of stuff. The ideal situation would be an Isak, right? But that's not the situation that we're in. You're going to be choosing between Gyokeres and Sesko, and neither one of them are necessarily on paper a slam dunk. It's just not. I think if we weren't in our situation and, we saw another team spending 60 million on Gyokeres, the questions that we'd be asking them is, well, do you think those goals are going to translate? Does he fit your system? We're not really asking those questions about Gyokeres because the mindset is very much so we just need to get somebody who scores a shit ton of goals. And we remove all the context around Gyokeres. but only apply, like, you know what I mean? It's like Gyokeres doesn't have any context. Neither one of them are perfect slam dunks. If you get Sesko, the whole thing is going to be more based around like, like, I agree with you. Do you feel like the combination of Havertz and Sesko is going to be enough? You know, Havertz is 15 goals, plus Gyokeres 20, 12 or 12 goals. Like, what does that give us? Do we feel like if you were to bring Sesko in a game against Manchester United when we need a goal, do you think he's going to score? Do you think that, you know, like you said, if we are drawing with Bournemouth, do you think you could bring him on and he's going to score a goal? I think those are actually the questions, like you're right, that we need to be asking ourselves. Like, do you think that he can come up with those rather than, well, if he gets 8 to 12 goals, it's a failure, even though I didn't think he, you know, I knew he was developmental to begin with, but it's a failure. So, you know, he met expectations, but it's a failure, even though he met expectations. You cannot fail if you meet expectations. You know, that doesn't make sense. Johnny D says, combination of Sesko, Havertz, and Jesus. Don't forget, please stop the hate. I don't include Jesus. Keenan says, I think Sesko will be the next Havertz. He will all be wondering why we dropped 90 million on him at the end of the season. We're not dropping 90 million on him. It's the fee is like 67 million. Havertz is not as bad as people are making him out to be. If he was present in our Champions League game against PSG, I believe we'd be in the final. I don't know 100% if I believe that, but you know you're going to get like 15 goals from Havertz in the league. You know, it's just, do we have the other 10? You know, because the whole point of the 25 goal per season striker is you need somebody that leads the line that's going to give you 25 plus goals, right? Havertz is only going to give you 15. Can Sesko make up the last 10? Probably, you know, so I think about it more of like that way. And is he going to have that goal scoring knack that Havertz doesn't have when we're desperate for a goal and we need one? That's more of a concern to me than whether or not he's going to be able to get 10 goals, because I think he will. O'Malley says, even if we got Isak, Havertz would start 20 plus games because Isak can't stay fit. Samuel says, Sesko discourse reminds me of how much I hate most of this fan base. I can't lie. Call it Arsenal fatigue or whatever. I think I feel like a lot of Arsenal fans are obsessed with Isak, which makes a lot of sense because it feels like we missed out on something that was right there, you know, but the club couldn't see that what he was going to become. And if you really do go back to that point in time in January of 2021 or 2022, January 2022, January 2021, and think about the conversations that were being had amongst Arsenal fans, it was very much similar to Sesko. Not good enough, not enough goals, doesn't look great. You know, how is that going to translate to the league? He's struggling in Spain. Why would he do good here? Only for him to, in the next, again, 2 to 3 seasons, because his first season, he only scored 10 goals. For the next 2, 3 seasons to become somebody that you guys are fucking obsessed with. And that's what I'm trying to say is that, you know, Sesko is not somebody that's going to bang right away. So the expectation is that he's not going to bang right away. So he can't fail to meet expectation. Like, he can't fail if the expectation is for him not to do that. What you're saying is that you want somebody that's going to bang right away. And so if you want that, then you probably want Gyokeres because you feel like that's a better option. But he cannot have failed if he meets his expectation, you know, and it's just such a strange way of thinking about things. And I feel like it's so for somebody that is really like not feeling Mikel right now, very disappointed in the season. I do feel like I sense that some people are just being a little bit over the top. And I understand so many of the viewpoints. I can see the more negative side. I can see the more positive side. But I do feel like with the Sesko thing, it's going to be one of those things where people are trying to make him worse. They're going to be very, very hyper negative about it. They're going to pretend he's shit when he's not. And it's going to be really, really tiring. Because I remember what it was like with Raya. And he just needed a half a season to get his shit together. Like, you know, so it's just, yeah. But if you don't want Sesko because you just want somebody who's ready to go, I can accept that. Like, I can accept that, but pretending like if he scored 8 to 12 goals, that would be him failing when you know that he's not already done, then I don't really get that. O'Malley says if we had got Isak. Well, you can say if we got Isak, but you guys didn't want Isak. Most of the fan base did not want Isak because he only had 4 goals, so it's like it's yeah. Mata says, I think Arteta might coach the shooting out of Sesko, which is an attribute I really like about Sesko. I don't know if I think he'll coach the shooting out of Sesko. I think my only real concern is he going to give him enough playing time to develop him? I don't think he'll coach the shooting out of him necessarily. But we'll see. We'll see. Choices say it's all hyperbole, unrealistic expectations based on an end goal. We will continue to be a work in progress. Both Sesko and Gyokeres have potential, but they are not the complete answer. And I do agree that I think people are saying that they think that Gyokeres is the answer and that they don't have any questions about anything else because that's just who they want. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, if you really like Gyokeres and I really like Gyokeres, there is no way that you're looking at him and you're not thinking, the goals, are they going to all translate? Does he fit the system? I think those are real things that make it like it's not a super clear slam dunk, but hey, it is what it is. Maybe we still get Gyokeres. Maybe it's all bullshit and we get him anyway. Like at this stage, I almost wish we would just get Gyokeres so that people can just have what they want and support him because they will support Gyokeres, but they won't support Sesko and it's going to get dark. Diallo says, keep it a buck. Sesko is a better footballer. He is. Sesko he has all the elements of a top 3 striker in the world. Gyokeres doesn't. Like, Gyokeres is scoring a lot of goals in another league, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. But he has limitations in his game that Sesko just doesn't have. Sesko doesn't have the consistency because he's not 26, 27. He's 21. And so when I watch the two play, I think that Gyokeres is really good and he scores a lot of goals. And I like that he works really hard and he has that urgency that I think we lack. I think he's more of a Suarez Vardy, but Sesko is way more of a Zlatan, and the difference. Like, he's got the thing. So yeah, but Sesko's not the finished article, so it's tough, because you are betting on potential. Foxy says, in general, Sesko will be expected to perform straight away because of the price, whether it's fair or not the same. Lesser than 10 goals first season, he'll be labeled a flop. I think he'll do decent. I actually don't think he'll score less than 10 goals, though. I think, but I also think that he'll be expected to be good right away, but he won't be starting all the time, so that will take a little bit of the pressure off of him. The pressure will really be on Havertz more than anything. But I agree with you that less than 10 goals would be, I think, I don't see less than 10 goals, but I get what you're saying, but yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm not going to be able to hide the fact that I really rate this player and I want him at Arsenal. Do I wish that we were in a situation where it wasn't so dire that we felt like we needed something more? Yes, but turning down a player like Sesko would be really difficult when I do truly believe that he's the next one. Let's see. Waylon says, if Marino got 9, he will definitely get more than 12. Mark says, Jess, I agree with you. He'll do better than 10, and even if he starts the season behind Havertz. Demore says, this smells of Vlahovic and Isak 3 seasons ago, and we ended up with Jesus. Detective says, this means Arteta will get more time with this young project striker, and the Cronkies will back. Do you guys actually think that Arteta's in any, he's not under any pressure to get sacked? Like, I know that a lot of people, he has to win something or blank, but the club don't feel that way. Like, reports have already come out that he's not really under pressure to win anything next season. So I'm not surprised that he's going to go with a striker that he feels like long-term is going to be a better option for us than the emergency buy that doesn't really fit us as much or doesn't fit us as well, in terms of stylistically, so I get what you guys are saying, but it's like, do you really think that Arteta will get more time? Like, Arteta is going to get more time. He's not under any pressure. And to me, the fans that that actually go to the games are okay with what's going on. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that he's going to go for this player, to be honest. Yo-Yo says Sesko requires a personality that Kai doesn't have. No shade to the German. Lars says, I don't think Havertz should start ever. Frederai says Sesko is not the issue. Arteta is the issue. Well, here's the thing. This is probably the truest words ever spoken is Sesko is not the issue. Arteta is the issue. And once you're more honest about that, that is actually more about Mikel and the fact that you don't like Mikel and that you don't want him here. So you don't want him to have his signings and, you want him to either get Gyokeres so that he bangs or you want him to get nothing and leave, I think then you'll be more honest about Sesko because where Sesko is and what our expectations of him are separate to your problem with Mikel. Like your problem with Mikel is separate to that, and I think people are letting their hate for Mikel cloud them with, oh, if he scored 10 goals next season, we're buying him for 10 goals next season. So, that would be a fail or a flop. No, it wouldn't. Burmy says, Jess, what are your characteristics of a left wing which would complement Sesko, or does it matter? What I would want for Sesko, because at Leipzig, they don't play to his strengths at all. He plays in a two-striker system where Openda is actually the box striker and Sesko is the one running the channels. I actually think that that's horrendous. I think it should be the opposite way. I thought Sesko should be the box striker and Openda should be the one out wide supplying Sesko. Sesko actually supplies Openda and not the other way around. And so I think the way that they play doesn't necessarily suit him. They try to play on the counterattack quite a bit and they don't have as much possession as we do. And so he doesn't take half as many touches in the box as like a Holland or an Isak would. Now, the thing that we have is we're always in the opposition's box. And we spend 90% of the time in and around the opposition's box. I want to say that we have the most touches in the opposition's box in the top 5 leagues than almost anyone. And so that will suit Sesko a lot more because he basically does a lot with a little, which is what I kind of showed you in that chart the other day, is that with less touches and less not being in the box and not getting as many touches, he's very effective with what he gets. He is so limited at RB Leipzig with the way that they play. He is not in a situation like Havertz where, Saka kicks, puts a ball across the 6 and Havertz misses a sitter, or, he's played in behind and Havertz misses the 1v1. He's not necessarily in a situation where he's getting Saka and Rice corners and they're right on his head so that he can just head it in. He's not in the same environment as our strikers are, so I think a left winger that comes in, I'd like for them to be quite creative because the more creativity you get around somebody like Sesko, the better. I think Saka is going to love him because he's going to be the type of player that can get on the end of those near post runs and those far post runs and those headers and all that kind of stuff. Those easy chances that Havertz misses, Sesko eats those. And then those half chances that a good ball striker or just a naturally instinctive striker puts away, he puts those away. Our left winger needs to be creative. He must be creative. There's no creativity on the left-hand side with Martinelli and Rice. So somebody like Williams or Rodrigo, to me, would be ideal. I think Williams gives you more of the 1v1 that we probably still want to keep, but Rodrigo gives you so much X factor and creativity that I'd be willing to concede on the 1v1 a little bit. So one of those two for sure. But people don't look at where Sesko is playing, and the fact that he even gets the amount of goals that he does get is kind of impressive considering they don't play to help him score. They don't set him up. They set up Openda and other players and he has to create for them and he's dropping in deep and doing this kind of stuff, but he's not the type of player that's just getting things served to him on a silver platter like people think he is. I think people think that Leipzig are giving him all these chances and he's only scored 15 goals. So that's just not good enough, but he's literally starving there, Jamaica says, so if everything goes bust next year, who should we be blamed? Because I can see the fans reaching back to the Wenger days. I mean, we can talk about that when we get there. I think that's the problem though, is that everybody is looking at Sesko as the reason why everything is going to go bust next season. And so you're projecting onto it and then being like, oh, it's like, well, when we get there, we'll talk about it. But I don't think if Arteta gets all of his signings, then there's nothing he can hide behind. And I think that's a positive for people that hate Mikel's guts, is that don't you want him to get the players that he wants so that he can't hide behind the sporting director? So I think, obviously when we get there, we'll talk about it. But I think what it's like, if we get Sesko, that means that there's no way that we can win the league. I think, okay. You know, Blaze says, of course, Arteta is not under pressure because we're babying him so much. I'm not babying him, but the club just don't see him as the problem that the fans do. So Diallo, thank you so much for your super chat. Says, I'm with that girl who would rather date Sesko, even though she knows Gyokeres is better in bed. Just stating the obvious, guys. Listen, it's Gyokeres is a perceived quick fix, which we'll see, because a lot of teams need strikers, and I think if like Liverpool actually really went for Gyokeres, which I haven't seen any concrete links from Gyokeres to Liverpool. I've seen light ones. I feel like that would concern me maybe a little bit more because, Liverpool's recruitment is quite good. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they feel like he's worth the risk. But a lot of clubs could use a striker. And, there's not, I don't think, a big race for him. So let's see how it goes. But there are concerns with Gyokeres as well. And I think people are being disingenuous if they don't feel like there are. It's not a total slam dunk the way people are making out to seem. And there might have been problems with him as well. So yeah, let's see. Let's see how it goes, man. Let's see how it goes. We haven't even signed him yet. So, things could change. Maybe we don't sign him. Maybe we sign Ollie Watkins, so let's see. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but Sesko to me feels like seems smart, but there are risks attached when it comes to the pressure that we're under to win something. So I understand that. I'm not saying that I don't. But also there are enough content creators right now that I've seen do emergency meetings because of the Sesko news. So if I'm not screaming enough or, saying enough profanity or killing the guy enough, then this probably isn't the stream for you. I actually really rate Sesko, so it's going to be difficult for me to lie about how I feel about the player just because I'm not so sure about Mikel. O'Malley says, thoughts on other striker moves in the Premier League, Ekitike, Delap. Delap, I think he's a good player. I think that, he doesn't deserve to be on a relegated side. I think he can make a difference for a lot of Premier League sides. Am I surprised that Chelsea went for him? Not necessarily. I think they want to scoop up any young talent that they can because they also feel like if it doesn't work out, they can flip it and sell. And I think that's not going to stop them from trying to go get at Ekitike. I think they do want to bring in two strikers. So I am not a big fan of Ekitike, not because I don't think that aesthetically he's a good player or anything like that, but somebody that underperforms their XG, by so much gives me Jesus vibes. He's getting the chances, but he's not putting them away. That is a bigger concern for me than somebody like Sesko who overperforms his XG. Sesko overperforms his XG. Ekitike underperforms his XG. Now, some people are like, well, Ekitike, he's getting chances, but eventually he'll put them away. I think people that underperform their XG the way that he does are just big chances miss merchants, like they're Jesus's. And I'd rather have somebody that overperforms XG like Kane, so somebody that with very little can make a lot out of a little. And that's why I feel like when you look at the metrics and you look at Sesko deeper, it's not so much that, well, he doesn't have so many goals in the Bundesliga, that means he's shit. He's in a side that's struggling, that doesn't suit him. But even with the lack of service and even with the lack of, them playing to his strengths, he still overperforms his XG. And I think that's more impressive than Ekitike, somebody that is older than Sesko, I think, right? Because Ekitike is like what, 24? Let's look. 23, 24. No, I think maybe 22. 22. That definitely is giving Jesus, but our fan base is obsessed with Jesus. And because we were so good in 22, 23, I think we decided, like a lot of people have decided that that's as good as it can get. And it's definitely not. But Delap, Ekitike, I think those are good signings for Chelsea. I think they solve some of their problems, especially because Nico Jackson has one of the worst conversion rates in the league, if not the worst, so those are good moves for them. Those are not strikers that I would want at Arsenal, though. Aha says basically every player misses a lot of big chances, sitters, but it's fine as long as they can still get a good amount of goals. Aubameyang miss sitters for us every week. Nuances says, I see us as third next season. If I'm honest, at least I have no expectations next season. Diallo says, oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good one. Mr. said, it'd be funny if we got Gyokeres and Sesko and then loan Sesko out for 2-3 years. Definitely won't do that. Detective says Sesko might end up like Højlund at Man United with pressure and price tag to be the main striker for a big club. He's not under pressure to be the main striker at the club. Havertz is going to start. The pressure is actually going to be on Havertz, not on him. If Højlund had come into a situation where he was the backup to another person, he probably would have been in a much better situation. So again, I feel like people are ignoring very obvious things and obvious information to try to force a point that doesn't really stand. Sesko's not going to be under pressure to lead the line for Arsenal next season, which is why you guys are mad anyway, because you know that Havertz is going to start. So if you know that Havertz is going to start, and that's the reason why you don't want Sesko, why are you pretending like he's going to be under pressure to lead the line? Like, do you see what I'm saying? You're not making sense. It's not adding up. Salah says, Igal is just frustrated like anyone. I think everybody's frustrated. I'm very frustrated. I just can't act like I don't like Sesko. I'm sorry. Stuart says Havertz won't start ahead of Sesko, in my opinion. He will. Josh says Sesko will definitely be under pressure. Not to lead the line because he's not going to be starting over Havertz. Obviously he'll be under pressure to score goals, but and a lot of that pressure is going to be mostly from Arsenal fans that are going to want him to fail. But I think as a fan base, we should probably keep our heads as well, because if he ends up, doing well, or if at the beginning he's, struggling a little bit to adapt, and then we freak out because he's not perfect, but the expectation was that he wasn't going to be perfect. The whole reason why you don't want him is because you know that he's going to need time to adapt. So if he's struggling to adapt and you start to act like it's a surprise to you and you're upset by it, it's just going to make things worse. So I think as a fan base, we also have to be realistic and a little bit more mature and not do like what we did with Raya, because that was horrendous. What was done to Raya was just ridiculous. Blaze says people need to understand it's Arteta will be under pressure, not Sesko. Thank you. Mark says Gyokeres can net us 15 to 20 goals this season, but I predict Sesko will be the equivalent of Haaland or Zlatan or Thierry Henry. Salah says thoughts on Shirky and Reinders from AC Milan. Love both of those players. Really like Reinders. I think it was SV Carbaholic that put out some of like the first things that I saw about Reinders, because I don't watch Serie A like religiously, but he had started talking about Reinders and saying that he'd be the perfect midfielder for us. Watched a couple games for AC Milan, fell in love, instantly knew we wouldn't get him, fell out of love, hate that he's going to City. Great player, the exact player that I would love to play left center mid for Arsenal. It is just such an obvious play. I would love for us to get away from the box crashers and shin kickers and, ghost Casper like left center mid and get somebody who makes football happen with the ball, somebody that scores goals and gets assists and is just a good ball carrier and just has all the footballing qualities to play in elite midfield. I would love Reinders. Turkey, I really like him as well. I just know that this is not the type of player that Arteta would want. So it's hard for me to attach myself to players that I know we're not going to get, because I don't want to get my heart broken. but he's definitely an Arsenal player. Arsenal would have had him already. Like, he would be an Arsenal player already. Now, Shirky going to Manchester City is strange to me because I don't think he's a Pep type of player. I think Pep takes players like this and strips them down to the bare bones, and they end up like Grealish. So I wonder how he would fare in a system where he's going to get the ball and Pep is going to say cut back, So I don't really necessarily feel like Shirky's a great fit for Pep City. I think Reinders is a good fit, but I don't think Shirky is a great fit. I think Shirky should go somewhere where he's going to be allowed to be the player that he is. And I'm not quite sure who that is, but I don't think it's Pep City. Stewart says Sesko is faster, stronger, and a better dribbler, better shooting. Don't think Havertz offers anywhere near enough to keep him out of the side. I don't think it has anything to do with whether or not he's better than Havertz or not. I just feel like Arteta is going to trust Havertz to start the season. So I do think he'll be the starter. John says, I just think that City and Liverpool signings are way better. I just have no hope for next season. We keep making the same signings on the same positions. Nuances says Shirky is definitely a Wenger signing. Pep's going to strip him of all the flair. Yeah, I don't see that being like the best fit, but at the same time, maybe Pep is going to evolve. I don't know. So, or maybe he'll allow him to be the one kind of maverick in midfield kind of thing. But, if you saw Bernardo Silva before he went there, if you saw Grealish before he went there, he finds a way to make those players' qualities work for his system and make the system really good, but it's not really about their individual flair, except for KDB. KDB was the one player that I think Pep always allowed to kind of have a little bit of freedom, and maybe that's something that he sees for Shirky. Maybe he'll allow him to have that freedom. So we'll see if they actually end up getting him, but I feel like it would be a shame for the footballing world to lose somebody like Shirky to a manager that tends to strip creative players of their flair. I would actually like to see Shirky go to like PSG. Because I know Luis Enrique would allow him to just do his thing. And I think it'd be really fun to see like Dembele, Barcola, Doué, Shirky all kind of like play together. I know they do like for their national team under 21, but I think that'd be pretty cool. Russell says, what if we buy both Victor and Sesko along with Saka? Our front three will be unstoppable. I don't think we're going to buy both. That would be cool, but it'd be cool to, I think if we were to get a second striker, it'd be somebody like Ollie Watkins, somebody that we feel like we get for like a cut price. I think the agent fees and wages and all that associated with getting Gyokeres would make it that getting both of them wouldn't help us, and I kind of don't want to get two strikers if that means we're not going to get the left wing, because only one striker can play at a time. And so I'd be more interested in getting, like, if you could get Mbomo or Ollie Watkins for like max 50 million, I feel like that's could still allow you to maybe get the left wing. But if getting getting Gyokeres would mean and Sesko would mean no left wing, I don't want it. I don't want it. Mr. says the one that worries me this summer is Nkunku. We know that Arteta loves a Chelsea reject. Remy says, who are you rooting for in the UCL final? Chaos. Victor says, people are underestimating Zubamindi. He isn't as flashy as like a Wirtz, Marmoush, or a Reinders, so our fans will complain about how we don't have any good signings. Zubamindi is going to get treated like shit by this fan base. I already know. Because the way that people are, well, he's not Wirtz. I'm like, of course he's not Wirtz. He's not playing in the same position. He's not a creative midfielder, like the fuck. But the idea that he's not going to add anything to this team is just mostly built on the fact that people don't want him. They're wanting to sign the same types of players as our rivals. And I think wanting something different and respecting and appreciating what the player actually is are two completely different things. I didn't want a left back last summer at all. I bitched about it the whole summer. I don't want another left back. I don't want another left back. I don't want another left back. But I wasn't about to sit there and pretend like Calafiore was shit, which is what a lot of people did. And what a lot of people would do with Zubimendi, and what a lot of people are going to end up doing with Sesko is, I didn't want this player, so I'm going to say that they're shit even though they're not, because this is not what I wanted. And I hate that, because then it ends up, for certain players, especially the ones that are online or maybe a little bit more fragile, it ends up like, they're shaky, and I just don't like that. Nuances says, I love Zuby. He won't look good on comps. That's not his game. I actually disagree. I think he looks really good on comps. I just think he's not flashy, which I think is what you're trying to say. Blaze says, there is rumors that Martinelli is an option for Barcelona if they fail to get Luis Diaz or Marcus Rashford. Well, Marcus Rashford is twerking for them, so I don't know how he wouldn't end up there. But if Martinelli were to go this season, this summer, I said I wouldn't necessarily be that upset. But we'll see. Ahmed says, thoughts on Lookman for the left wing. He wouldn't be my number one choice. He'd be kind of further down the list. But if he came, he's a good player. Easter Ripper says, legit forgot about the Zubimendi signing. Keenan says, Jess, we should be in for Enrique next summer. I think he will be the best replacement for Arteta. Yo-Yo said the same thing. Mark said, what do you think of us in a 4-4-1-1 with Havertz in the number 10 role? I'm not a fan of trying to get Havertz in some second striker role. I think it's an idea, and it's mostly based upon how he played for Leverkusen, but I think it's an idea that doesn't necessarily float my boat. If Sesko plays, I want Havertz on the bench, and if Havertz plays, then Sesko is going to have to be on the bench. I think this idea of them doing this 1-2 step doesn't account for the fact that neither one of them are necessarily super creative, and it feels clunky and like we're just taking away one potential creative option to make sure that we get both of them in the team. So for me, it's a no. But maybe Arteta will run it, at some stage. But for me, it's a no. Ahmed says, same. Leao is my first choice. Lookman backup because Rodrigo Defo isn't coming. Keenan says, if we can swap Martinelli for Fermin Lopez, it would be the best transfer all time. Brian says, Partey should play. I hope that Zubimendi is the starter. I don't think Arteta is going to bring in his prodigal son and sit him on the bench for Partey. Partey has 1 year left on his deal when he signs his new deal, and so that means that he's a backup. And so there's no reason to not play Zubimendi to keep Partey in the role. I know that that's another reason why people are going to shit on Zubimendi, is not because he's not good, but because he's not Partey. And I think we need to start moving away from somebody who's not in our long-term future. Zubimendi should be the starter. You're investing money, you've invested time in trying to get him here. And there's no reason in continuing to play that midfield if you have somebody that can step in. He's not a child. He's, played big games for his international team. He's not somebody that's going to need a tons of time to adapt. So Partey, count your days. It's time to move on from him. Keenan says Havertz should just go to Italy and play 5-3-2. Johnny says, of course, we need two of the Rice, Partey, Zubimendi on the team. No question. On the pitch at the same time. That's not even a discussion. I believe we're not getting Rodrigo or Leao, since it'll be another young project winger, either Nico Williams or Jamie Gittins. Leao is an idea as well, in my opinion, but Rodrigo would be the ideal. I think Nico Williams is very underrated by this fan base, because what they do is when we get linked to somebody, they go straight to SofaScore or who scored or whatever, and then pull up their stats from there. And if it doesn't say 15, 20 goals, they just instantly think the player is shit. Or they listen to somebody that's never watched them before give their ideas on a player. Nico Williams elevates this team. Does he still have some rawness to him? Yes, but just because you are not the finished article does not mean you cannot elevate this side. Our attack is shit. Our attack is not good. So if you bring in somebody who is the starting left winger for Spain is not a dud. So this is Lamine Yamal's counterpart for Spain. This is somebody that, he has so many good qualities. Barcelona wanted him as well. They're just not getting him because Rafinha went crazy. I don't understand the aversion towards Nico Williams. And if the only way that you analyze a player is you go and you look at their goals and assists, and then that's how you analyze a player, then to me, I just don't, I don't get it. Because if you look at Lamine Yamal's stats and that's the only thing you look at, then you'll miss the picture. Like this player, Nico Williams, is not that far away from the Leaos and shit like that. Leao has amazing PR, but he is so inconsistent. He doesn't even start for AC Milan anymore. He doesn't even start. So I get that Nico Williams doesn't have the stats, but please watch football with your eyes, because that guy, I posted a comp of Nico Williams against Barcelona, and he was really, really, really good. And people were saying underneath the thing that, oh, he's not any better than Martinelli. And I'm like, there's no way that you have watched Martinelli over the last 2 seasons and you watch Nico Williams, you think it's the exact same or worse. There is no way. No fucking way. Nuances says, I've watched him plenty of times. I generally don't see what you see in him. Fair enough. Victor says, Jess, I think it's the wages that are being quoted, to be fair. If you don't want him because of the wages, fair. But I don't think that we'd even be really interested in him if we didn't feel like we could negotiate the wages. So we'll see what happens. But yeah. Stuart says, I like Nico Williams. He just doesn't seem to be in vogue anymore, which is another thing. If you don't have the hype train behind you, Arsenal fans don't want you. It's just a strange way of looking at players and whether or not they'd be good enough for Arsenal. For me, it's more, I try to look at the qualities that they have. And if they're not quite at their top level, meaning like they still need a little bit of like development or whatever, I'm thinking, are these coachable things, or are these things that you either have it or you don't? You're not going to be able to teach pace. You're not going to be able to teach, footballing IQ. Those are things you either kind of have it or you don't. But things like, when to make the run, or, refining somebody's, placement of their shot, or, teaching them what decision to make when, like sometimes those things are like more coachable. I think Nico Williams' biggest thing is, one, he plays in a team that doesn't necessarily have the type of personalities or the types of players in it to help facilitate him and his brother playing at a high level. It's basically Nico Williams and Inaki Williams or bust. So they don't have necessarily like a creative midfielder that kind of pulls the strings for them. And he needs to refine his final action. Those are the main things that he needs to figure out. David says, Nico has the pace of Martinelli, a better 1v1, a better passer, keeps his head up, and a better left foot. Agreed. Yuri says, the best players should play. It doesn't matter if one costs 80 million or the others from the academy. Arteta will try to keep Kai Havertz and Martin Odegaard in the starting 11 no matter what, just for personal pride. Josh says, Nico is definitely exciting to watch. I think he'd light up the Emirates. I'm guessing he's not hit the heights he was at before the season. And I feel like we have so much sympathy or whatever for our own players when we think about like, oh, well, they hit a rough patch this season, or, this player was missing, they had injuries, whatever. But when we look at players from other teams, we don't think that. Bilbao were not firing on all cylinders this season. They had a rough season. They finished in the top 4 this season in La Liga, but they were not anywhere near as like consistent, or, I think one of the main reasons why they finished top 4 instead of anyone else is just nobody else was able to get up there. Sociedad had a really poor season. And also Zubamendi also falls in this category where, teams have low seasons or they have inconsistencies, injuries, whatever, and those impact the performances of players that you're looking at. We know that because when we look at our team, we say, oh, Odegaard was missing, Saka was missing. So yeah, these things make sense. When we look at other players, it's like we don't take into consideration how they're being used, the system, the type of season that they're having, the coaching, anything. It's just, he's shit. I looked at his SOFA score and he had 5 goals this season. He's ass. And I'm just like, that's just not the way. Blaze says, Jess, what's your preference for left winger? Rodrigo, if we can swing it. If not, Nico Williams. Gotta be. Gotta be Nico Williams. He just has all the things, like all the things that we're looking for: the pace, the 1v1, the creative, all those things. So yeah. Let me just check the timeline, make sure I'm not missing anything. This is a really good discussion, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Oh, Liverpool announced Jeremy Frimpong. Let's see. Gonna be interesting days for that guy because personally, he is not my type of fullback. I don't think he's crap. Like, I can see that he's a good player, but he's not the type of fullback that I would ever want. But he's definitely in keeping with not really good defensively, but good attacking wise. So, but Liverpool are a very attack minded side. So that probably really works for them. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, we're kind of like the exact opposite. The defenders that we have are more defensive minded and probably could use some more attacking prowess, where theirs are more attack minded that could probably use some defensive prowess, so it's interesting. Salah says he is an LFC kind of fullback. Exactly. Play says, I was moved by Nico Williams' comps against Barcelona. He is a good player. I was impressed by him in Euro 2024. Josh says he may be the definition of a flying fullback. Diallo says, Jess, they don't know this, but in terms of style, Gyokeres is actually closer to Nunez than Sesko. Gyokeres is a strong bodybuilder who can hit the ball extra hard. I just thought it was interesting, whoever made that point earlier, saying that Sesko reminds them of Nunez, or he thinks that they're a Nunez. I'm like, that couldn't be any further of like they just don't, there's no overlap there at all. Gyokeres, the main reason why people have concerns about Gyokeres is they feel he's a Nunez, meaning the qualities that he has, the space and all that he has in the Portuguese league made that it was like the goals that he's scoring didn't translate. I do not really get the comp. I don't get the comp with Nunez at all. I think he's more of an Isak, to be fair. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Salah says, Jess, what are your options for left wing 3, 4, and 5? 3, 4, and 5. I mean, I only really want Rodrigo and Nico Williams, if I'm honest. Like, if I have to go beyond that, then it's kind of like pick out of the bag and see who you get. Maybe like Rodrigo, Nico Williams, Leao, Matoma, because both of them are incredibly inconsistent, but definitely have X factor and fun things that would make it nice. And then Jamie Gittins, and then Lookman, like something like that. Yeah. Stuart says, I like Nico a lot. I just feel if we're talking to him seriously, we would be seeing more trickling out now. That's fair enough. Victor says, no way somebody just mentioned Garnacho wouldn't take him for a packet of chips. Not Garnacho, guys. Johnny says, well, Diallo, after the mini Campo strike of Havertz ball, that made me puke. I prefer the manly opposite of Gyokeres. I'll feel like a virgin girl waiting for the love of my life. Space Time says, Nico is a touchline guy, while Rodrigo is more of a 10 that can play wide. If Rodrigo move doesn't happen, Simmons would be an alternative. Yeah, Simmons would be an alternative to Rodrigo, because they are quite different. Now, Rodrigo would require Mikel to change his tactics. And I fear for any player that Arteta would need to bring in where he'd need to change his tactics, because Arteta doesn't change for anyone. It's not even like he's trying to prop Saka up or any of his favorite players to play in their best ability. Everybody is kind of suffering under Mikel right now. So I don't know who. I think only maybe Kai Havertz is getting the tactics and stuff to suit his style. Like, everybody else is like, has to give a little, so I think he'd have to change his style for Rodrigo, even though Rodrigo's probably the biggest level raiser. And he would have to change his style for Gyokeres. Gyokeres is probably the most experienced and more finished article. So, a lot of people would prefer Rodrigo and Gyokeres. My fear with those two is that they don't plug and play into the system where Sesko and Nico Williams do, which is why I think they're the number one targets. I genuinely feel like those are the number one targets because them plus Zubamendi all just really neatly fit into the positions that they get into, where the other ones like Rodrigo and Gyokeres would take some figuring out. And Arteta's rigid. Arteta's incredibly rigid. Samuel says, "What are we talking about? Rodrigo is a natural left wing." He, you can be a left winger, but all left wingers are not the same. We know that both Trossard and Martinelli are left wingers, but neither one of them are the same. They need to be in different pockets for their things like to work out better. Trossard is better in tight spaces. He's better coming more central. He's, his style of play, although him and Martinelli are left wingers, are much different. And so I think when people are saying that Rodrigo is different than Nico Williams, is because they quite literally are. One is really pacey and a great 1v1 player. Rodrigo's not necessarily a 1v1 player, but he's more creative. And when he comes central, he can act more like a number 10, which is why him and Javi Simmons are more like for like than Nico Williams. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Just like strikers can be different, left wingers can be different. You can be a left winger and not be anything like another left winger. It's all about styles and what your main attributes are. Some like a Lamine Yamal, he's not really somebody that's going to run by you. He's going to cut inside, and he's more of like he reminds me a lot of like a Di Maria or like somebody that's going to be more creative on the wing and come central. And he's just different than somebody that's going to try to take you on the outside and beat you for pace. Like everybody's different. So Rodrigo is a left winger and he plays right wing for Real Madrid, and that doesn't suit him as much. But Arteta will have to change his system to suit Rodrigo because he's not a touchline winger. He's somebody that wants to come inside more. He's not somebody that's going to do well being faced up against a defender 1v1 all the time. He's going to want to come central and combine. He's going to want to, get those 1-2s off. He's going to want to see the pitch from the central areas. That's what he is, Victor says Rodrigo reminds me of Nelly in the fact that they're more centrally biased. They don't do the touchline thing, but because Rodrigo is way bigger talent, he warrants a change of system. I agree with that. Kingsley says, Jess, I've noticed you're racist and quite unfortunate. Every time you talk about Partey, you're so racist, very disgusting. Partey has been our best midfielder, but you have a way of discrediting. What does that have to do with his skin color? I don't want somebody that has those allegations outside on the team. It doesn't matter if he's green, blue, gray, purple, or red. I don't want somebody on the team anymore that has outstanding charges for something that's so heinous and disgusting and makes me really do not like my club anymore. So it doesn't have anything to do with his skin color. How am I racist when my favorite player is Vieira? How am I racist when I actively want Nico Williams at this club? How am I racist when I love Saka? How am I racist? Everybody that doesn't want Partey at the club is not racist. You guys need to get a grip on reality and understand that some people just don't want somebody at the club that has heinous allegations against them that have not been cleared and are hovering over this club like a bad smell. Nobody is racist. Grow up. Get out of just get out. I do not like talking about Partey. Just get off of this platform. It is the most disgusting thing when I see people try to justify people not wanting somebody at the club that has those nasty allegations against them. It doesn't have anything to do with the skin color. You guys are so I hate when people do that. It's just, you're trying to villainize me for not wanting somebody at the club that has those things going on. It's the worst thing to me, it's the worst thing about this club right now is that it's the elephant in the room. Ugh. It's just so annoying. I could Spacetime says Partey single-handedly is destroying this club's reputation. Think about the victims. No one cares. And I get it's no longer hearsay when there's actual allegations and the police are involved. It's not somebody online that's speaking about it and it's just like a rumor. It's not that. Multiple allegations, not cleared, been arrested. It's not hearsay. And so I try to be as nice as I possibly can and either just don't speak about it at all. But the reality is I just can't stand it. Like it puts a foul taste in my mouth. And one thing that hurts me the most is that if you've been on the channel for a long time, you know how much I loved Partey. You know it. You know it because I used to back him like when he was injured all the time, I backed him like no one else. I was like, just give him another season, just give him another season, he'll be fit. So there's nobody on this planet that can be racist about somebody that was literally my favorite player at this club before that moment. So there's just no way. Sorry. And listen, if if you're like innocent before proven guilty, that's fine. But I'm very concerned that something that's been going on since 2022 has not been cleared. And we're in 2025 now. And more allegations came out this season. So I'm sorry, but I just I'd rather just him not be here so that we could just be clear of it because it's icky. Chris says there's always a few of those low IQ morons in the chat, Jess. I damn near dropped my lunch hearing you read that. And I'm just like, it's just strange. But it's not the first time that people have said I'm racist. Like they think I hate all the black players on the team, and I just literally don't. So yeah, Yo-Yo says Arteta is changing the system based off of the fact that Sesko will not be playing the false nine. When he plays like Kai, Marino, Jesus, I'm here for a different profile to Martinelli. Time to level up. I totally agree. Sala says, are we watching the UCL final? I am frustrated we didn't get there this year. It'll be harder next year. I think I'm going to my friend's house, so I don't think I'm going to do a watch along. If I end up not going to my friend's house, then I will let you know, and then maybe we'll do something. But I got to get out of this house, guys. I really have. The last time I was at my parents' house not too long ago, but I haven't been outside and interacted with anybody outside of people online. I need to go outside. Josh says, you ain't, oh no. I don't want to, no more party stuff, guys. We're just going to move on from that, okay? It's bringing down the mood, like, horribly. Let's see. Anything else going on? Let's check the poll because I think the Sesko signing really does hinge on what would be the best player to complement him. I think the level of that player and how they operate makes a difference. 71% said Rodrigo, 11% Matoma, 11% Williams. So basically I think what people are basically saying is if we get Rodrigo, then that would make the Sesko signing make more sense. And I agree. We haven't heard anything about left wing in a while, but I think Ornstein said like early on not to expect an early resolution on left wing. And yeah, that worries me just a teach. Just, a little bit, but we shall see. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Rock says Williams will compliment him the most. I think because Rodrigo's level and it's like a serious signing, like people consider it like a serious signing, that's why they rate him over Nico Williams. It's like, well, he's ready-made. He's won things before. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I actually think that Rodrigo, to me, feels more of a slam dunk signing than Gyokeres because we already know what he's like in the top 5 leagues. He's won things here. He's performed here. We've seen him here. And I actually think Rodrigo is actually a more sure bet than Gyokeres because Gyokeres, there is something in the back of my mind that scares the shit out of me. GZ says, does the same energy, I don't care about this. Sorry. Ruak says, yeah, I agree but I'm happy with Williams. Waylon says, I want Inter to win the UCL. Can't have another team winning the UCL before us. I want carnage. Like that's pretty much all I want. But I think Inter have, with them losing out on the Scudetto, I think they kind of have to win the Champions League because they started to really kind of stutter towards the end of the season. So I feel like Inter winning it would be good for them because of the season that they've had like they kind of had it in their hands and then they didn't have it anymore. And, They were fighting in these latter stages of the Champions League, but they couldn't get it together in the league, and they just lost it on the last day pretty much. It wasn't in their hands, but it slipped away. But PSG, I do think, I mean, they've been working at trying to win this Champions League for a while. I think they've been, I mean, we also don't have one, but I think that we've spent quite a long time in the doldrums, just kind of like way lower than we need to be. So I don't know if I'd be that disappointed if PSG won. I think it also would show that if you're serious in the market and you bring in good attacking players and you have X factor, that you can win a Champions League if you've never won one before. That's a good blueprint for us. That's a good omen for us. So I wouldn't be upset if PSG won. I just want a good game. I think the semis, especially their semis, the Inter Barcelona semis, has set a very high bar, but I think finals tend to be a lot more cagey. So we'll see how it goes. Redemption says, you are just saying Williams because this club isn't serious enough for Rodrigo. No, I said I'd prefer Rodrigo, actually. So again, make sure you guys are listening. I said I'd prefer Rodrigo. He would be my number one choice and Williams would be second, but I wouldn't be upset with Williams. So make sure you guys are listening for understanding. Nuances says, this club does that a lot, though. I'm worried they could just be running PR for left wing. That's definitely a concern. I totally 100% agree that there is something in the back of your mind that says maybe we don't get left wing until we have to see it first. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic that we get it, but I am concerned about the fact that we were meant to get attackers last summer and we didn't get them. But I'm also not going to act like we haven't gotten it when the window hasn't even opened yet. I think some people are acting like the window has failed already before it even happens. And if you want to do that, fair enough, but the window hasn't opened yet. So cautiously optimistic, but a little bit concerned still at the same time. Vic says, all depends on whether Rodrigo's going to the Club World Cup. If he goes, we aren't getting him. Sala says, all right, Jess, thanks for this. Blessing says, you think Sesko will cost more than Kai? Yeah, I do. I think he'll cost just a little bit more. I think it'll be somewhere between 67 million pounds or 75 million pounds, somewhere between there. So it'll be more than Kai. We should have spent like max, if we just had to get him, 30 million for him. Spending 65 million on him has been shocking. Yeah. Rep says, I'm late to the show. What's up with the second striker incoming thing? Are we signing another striker in addition to Sesko? There are some rumors that we may go for Ollie Watkins as well, but those are just in the know murmurings. And I think that just opens up a conversation about what type of player needs to come in with Sesko in order to make the Sesko signing feel better. I think everybody can agree that Sesko is not the finished article, so you can't just rely upon him. And you also probably wouldn't just want to rely upon him and Havertz. So whether it's Mbomo or Ollie Watkins coming in as well, or just a high level left wing, something else needs to come in. Ollie Watkins on a super, super low, like, 30 million or take it, I'd be interested. But anything like 50 million or more, I think we have to say, fuck it, no. Amina says, I have a hunch that Sesko might be moved to the left and Kai will still be our main striker. I don't see how Arteta drops Kai. I don't see Sesko playing wing for us, but I hear ya. Rock says, I'm confident we get a left wing. Blessing says, and we genuinely want him irrespective of the goal return. Do we have time to wait for a few more seasons for Sesko to bang? I mean, listen, if he doesn't, because here's the thing is when people say, do we have time for Sesko to bang? I think we're assuming that he's going to start. He's not. Like, Havertz is going to start. So it's going to be more of is the goal return for Sesko plus Havertz going to make up for, in this particular season, not having a 20-something goal per season striker? I think that's the conversation that we're having. And also, is Sesko going to be able to score those goals in those big moments that maybe Havertz can't? I don't think it's so much about do we have time for Sesko to bang because it's not like Sesko is going to like be playing all those minutes from the very beginning. It's going to be a lot of Havertz playing and Sesko getting little minutes here and there. So I'm looking at it more from a perspective of do I think that if we bring Sesko off of the bench, he'll be able to score goals against Bournemouth and, Everton to make sure that we don't draw some of those games. Like, could it be the difference in the games that, we needed a goal? Yes. Do I think that if he gets 10 goals and Havertz gets 15, that will be enough? Probably, because a 25 goal per season striker would probably get those 25 goals. And then from there, it's just, how does Arteta utilize them? And do we bring in the left wing as well? But I think people are, that Havertz is going to start. So it's not going to really be about him hitting the ground running as a starter. It's going to be, can he come off of the bench and make an impact? Could he be kind of like a John Duran for us, I think, I think that's more what it is, Josh says Kai starting as a striker. If Sesko costs 60, 70 million, I don't think he'll be on the bench. Adam says Havertz starting Finito FC. Chris says, Johnny, you are not wrong. Ryan says, how valid are the OD criticism? Do you think we would be better with a more direct ball carrier attacking mid like Morgan Rogers? I mean, I don't know, guys. We've criticized Odegaard to the end of time, so he had a poor season, but I think he's probably going to start next season. So how much more do you want to criticize somebody that is probably going to start next season? He's not going to get stripped of his captaincy. I think that a bigger issue is that not that he's the player, is that it's only him. Just getting him out and just adding somebody else in doesn't necessarily mean that you have more creativity. It's just we need more players that are creative on the pitch. I feel like that's more of the problem than anything. I've never seen a club have one creative player in midfield and then have only one attacker that can give you an assist. So adding more creativity will probably make it less of a problem. But Odegaard criticism, I mean, if you want to criticize him, we've talked about it. We talked about it on the season review. We've spoken about it on multiple streams. I just don't think that, what else can we really do? I feel like the left-hand side has zero creativity. At least the right-hand side has creativity. So maybe if the left-hand side had a single creative player, it wouldn't be such a big deal that Odegaard is not KDB, but that's how I kind of think about it. I think Morgan Rogers, maybe, but is he necessarily the type of player that's going to get 15 and 15? Probably not. He's different, but is he necessarily more creative? No. So I don't know. I mean, Morgan Rogers' best season so far isn't better than Odegaard's best season or even his last season, so yeah, I don't know. I think we need to add more creativity. We need to buy a left center mid with creativity to add to Odegaard. Odegaard can get back to his best, and make sure that the left winger at least has some creativity. But how much more can we say about Odegaard? He's not getting taken out of the team. So what else what else is there really to go for, Blaze says our fan base doesn't deserve Odegaard. He wasn't good this season, but he also had an injury. People forget that. Listen, I don't know whether or not the injury has hampered him or not, but I would imagine if you tore ligaments in your ankle and came straight back in, you probably would struggle. Even Saka came back from his injury and struggled. So Odegaard's kind of, he doesn't get any of the same type of like grace or anything that like Saka has gotten or Martinelli or anyone. So it's just he's shit now. So we'll see. Boy says if Sesko played left wing, just pack it up. Blessing says I'm hoping Zubi and Rice allow him to free him up more. One of the things that I am looking forward to is, like you said, if Zubamendi is doing the tempo control, then Odegaard's not doing it. Odegaard in the last 2 seasons, his role has changed, and I still feel like people are either actively ignoring it or don't see it. But when Xhaka was here, he didn't need to do that. he was a lot further forward. He basically existed between the lines, and Party would get it and pass it between the lines to him in advanced positions. He was more free. He was more central as well in zone 14, which is the area that we can't access now. Now, with Odegaard deeper, it's just a different dynamic. Left center mid doesn't really do the footballing stuff. They basically just go like ghost into the box, and they're more of the third midfielder, and Odegaard is playing more of the deeper role. And so you can't play the deep role and also be the attacking mid. So it's just a different dynamic. If Zubamendi's doing all that stuff, then I'm kind of assuming that Odegaard will be more free. And if Zubamendi can find Odegaard between the lines a little bit more, and he feels more free to kind of like bounce around in that zone 14, then we'll be much better. But, it's just he's shit. So, that's pretty much where we've gotten to with this fan base. He's just horrible, Mr. Mister says with Odegaard, that injury probably affected him more than we think. He started to show flashes at the end of the season. I reckon he'll have an improved next season. But just like with the Sesko situation, it's the assumption is that the worst possible thing is going to happen every time. That Sesko is going to be terrible. The window is going to be terrible. Odegaard's going to be terrible. Everything's going to be horrendous. And I'm just like, maybe some things will just be fine. I don't know. But I think in general, when you lose Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus and Xhaka basically in one season, and you replace them with less creative players, and you leave Odegaard, and then you're surprised that we lack creativity, and then you expect one person to carry all of it. Like even with Cole Palmer, he's incredibly creative, but he's not the only creative player that they have. Enzo Fernandez is creative as well. It's Arsenal are the only team that I've ever seen that actively has one creative midfielder or one player that can at least create, and then we're surprised that we lack creativity. Space Time says Darwin Nunez is on the bench for Liverpool. He costs more than Havertz. Sesko will get his minutes, so will Havertz, either together or deputizing for each other. Blake says, if you look closely to image or video, Odegaard had a serious injury. You don't have to come back quickly. You don't come back quickly from that injury. You don't, but it is what it is. Anatile says, Odegaard will be fine. Need him in zone 14 way more than 15 and 12. Absolutely. We really need to, if somebody, I just feel like, I don't know if maybe people felt like this in the 2022-2023 season, but prior to this season, I never really felt like I thought that he wasn't creative. But a lot of people have taken up this idea that he's just an 8 now and he's not creative. And I'm like, he's playing as an 8, but of course he's creative. Of course he can pick passes, like he's done it before. We weren't talking like this 2 years ago, but I don't know. I feel like, to me, this is a way different feeling based off of a season where pretty much the collective didn't play as well. We didn't add those people that we were supposed to, and he got a major injury, and we're making big assumptions of a player based on one season. And maybe because I didn't feel that way. I never felt like Odegaard was not creative, but maybe you guys do. Blaze says, I won't be surprised if Odegaard will have surgery before next season. Blessing says, Odegaard in the 23-24 was top of the charts during the season for open play chances created, which, that's why when people are saying that he's not creative, I just feel like that's more based on this past season than any other season. But, I'm also love Odegaard, so maybe I can't see it, but I'm like, I don't think he's not creative. I just think there's less creativity in the team, and he's not playing in the 10 anymore. So it's like we don't have any creators in the team. Odegaard is getting asked to play 6, 8, and 10. How can people not see that madness? It's clear that he needs help, which manager clearly is unlikely to give. Odegaard is a victim of Arteta's system. Victor says Sesko left wing could work. Goal scoring left wing with the creative right wing. Saka's crossing to the back post like Barca's system. Sesko also has a power shot like Rafinha. It could work. There's some good things in there for sure. Keenan says, I think Sesko, Zubi, Nico will end up being our signings for the summer. Time will tell if that's enough. Sesko and Martinelli can work. Sandip says we expect more from the team. Odegaard represents the team, lack of creativity down to the manager. And I'm not saying that there's not times that I think that Odegaard doesn't play well, or I don't think that it's just the system all the time. But I do think not applying that context and pretending like he's just running around in the same system that we did 2 years ago when he got 15 and 15 is disingenuous. We know it's not. And I cannot explain how much of an impact losing Xhaka, not having Zinchenko, overflowing in midfield or overloading in midfield, and not having Jesus really makes us a way less creative side. We removed 3 technicians from the team and replaced probably 2 of them with players that do not have any creativity and do not have the same technical quality. So how does that not impact the players around them or the roles that they're playing? I just feel like it's obvious to see. But equally, Odegaard has some issues where in big games sometimes he does ghost. And so that doesn't have anything to do with that particular part of the conversation. That's something he needs to look at himself in. But in terms of he's not creative, I just feel like that's a farce. Greg says, I strained my ankle ligament and it's not sort of hurts after 6 months. I mean, I've had an Achilles problem for about 3 months now, and every morning when I wake up, I can barely walk. So I can only imagine what it feels like to tear ligaments in your fucking ankle. You know, Waylon says, I miss 22-23 Xhaka. Josh says, how can you expect creativity from our players in a system as rigid as ours? Blessing says, that's also true. Stuart says, to be honest, who is Odegaard creating for in this season that can actually do anything? Nobody moves either. Have you noticed that? I remember there was a pass that Odegaard made for Calafiori in one of those games, and people were like, where has that been all season? I'm like, when's the last time you've seen somebody make a run like that? You know, when Declan Rice made that run in the Newcastle game or whatever game it was. I think it was one of the games that we bottled. It might have been Bournemouth. I don't know. But and Odegaard passed into Declan Rice and they scored. I'm like, it's not so much that like from a standing start and when we're condensed and him and Saka are standing right next to each other and the gaps are this big, it's really hard to create anything. You need to make movement. You need to move in order to create those spaces for the gaps to appear. So I think there's multiple layers, which for almost every problem that we have, perceived problem that we have, there are layers to it, and it's not really black or white, but it tends to get whittled down to black and white when we want to be super negative about things, I feel. And I just don't feel like it's like Odegaard is just shit. I'm just like, there's no way you think that, but I think you have to say that so that you can be negative. So I get it. Mhm. Yo-Yo says that was by design, not necessity. Xhaka had to go, but he didn't have to go with Rice, Kai, Way, and double down with Marino. Arteta chose this direction and must make it work now. And I feel that's kind of why I think about it from a perspective of how do we move forward, because unfortunately, we're never going to go back to what we had with Xhaka, because if we were going to, Arteta would have recruited a player like Granite. The fact that Rice and Kai and Marino have come in lets you know that he's not really concerned about left center mid being technical or creative. So that means that the creativity has to come from somewhere else. You're going to have Zubimendi, Odegaard, and Rice is going to be your starting midfield next season. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I really don't think that there's a chance that he's going to drop his captain, his marquee signing, or his prodigal son to do something different. I think, obviously he'll try other things and modify, but I think that's pretty close to what you're going to get. And even if you add, Kai to it and take Odegaard out, even if you take Zubimendi out and you add Partey in, none of those options make you more creative. So the only other way that we can add creativity into the side is the left wing. And that's why I'm really adamant about left wing being creative, because if we're not going to add it from a midfield perspective, it needs to come from somewhere else. So left wing to me, it needs to be a creative player. It needs to be somebody that can find their teammates. Blessing says Xhaka didn't have to go. He only left because he wanted to. I think Xhaka wanted to leave. I don't know why people keep saying that he wanted to stay. I think it was pretty clear he wanted to go. Yo-Yo says left wing is simply critical. It decides everything. We need more pace and direct dog balls now and then. What's dog balls? But like long balls? Abdullah says, do you think Sesko will accept to be replacement for Havertz because he refused that last summer? I mean, yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, if we're in negotiations now, he knows the reality, but it's a year on and he's suffered at Leipzig because he didn't come last summer. And really he would have gotten a shit ton of playing time this season because Kai got hurt. So there's plenty of minutes to go around. There's a period of time where, Jesus was playing in the Premier League, so yeah, I think that, he'll do it now, because what he chose to do didn't work. Chris says, I'm calling long balls dog balls from now on. What do we say? Dog balls. Diallo said coochie. He'll be coochie if he gets certain players. Let me find the super chat. Yeah. Diallo says, give me Sesko and a sneaky Watkins and I'm coochie. So we have coochie, we have dog balls, and we have goosebumps. Nuances says we need a proper CM, but Arteta keeps doing fringe experiments on the position. Blessing, I don't think you were here, but he said I'll be coochie. It cracked me up. I was like, that's hilarious. But yeah, we need to. I think I personally have to, like, as much as I bitch about it, because I could talk to you about the way that I hate our midfield more than anything. Till I'm blue in the face, but Arteta doubling down means that nothing is going to change. He loves this second striker box crasher bullshit, so this is what we have. If you're going to buy Zubamendi, you're saying that Rice is going to play the 8. So nothing is really going to change there unless we get a new manager. So it's going to be basically left wing or bust. Left wing or bust. Stuart says the best is yet to come, guys. Adebayo says Coochie is crazy on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Big pause. Yo-Yo says peak Alexis Sanchez would be a game changer in this team, skill set and personality wise. Yeah, it would. I would love somebody like Alexis, but Alexis's aren't just hanging around, So I think the best you can think of is probably Rodrigo in terms of impact and the level of talent that you'd be injecting into the team. I don't think his personality is the same, and I don't think they're necessarily similar types of players. Like I already said, Rodrigo is more of like a creator type of winger, and Alexis was just a freak of nature. So yeah, but bringing in more talent at a high level will definitely help this squad. David says Sesko's pace will benefit everyone in attack, including Odegaard and Merino. Merino's assist to Saka at the Bernabeu. Raya will be very happy as well. Adebayo says when Sesko becomes the best number 9 in the world, need y'all to stay on that side. Salah says, how do we miss Krava? We just didn't want him. Steven says, I don't care about Sesko being a better footballer. Is he going to bag? Shaking my head, need Gyokeres. Do you know for sure that Gyokeres is going to bag? Gyokeres, I love him, and I would take him, and he probably would be my number 1 choice just to make sure that we, just because it feels safer, but there's still some big question marks around Gyokeres too. Johnny says, I would take Thierry Henry, not speaking, but playing. But if you like Alexis more, that's your business. Yo-Yo says, we need another prick. No more wallflowers and gentlemen. Blessing says, I haven't chosen a side on Sesko, just want goals. Josh says, we need Mariona and Russo in this team. Listen, if the women can show you anything, is that having a goal scorer and a top quality, like world-class midfielder, what that will do for you, like it changes everything. I mean, the women had a great core group of players. They're not too dissimilar to the men. I think they have more attacking quality, but they're not too dissimilar to the men, where they had a core of a really good team, but without that real goal scorer and without that different level quality in Mariona, we wouldn't have won anything, So I really do think that the men need to look at that and look for game changers. I would love to I would love to have I would love to have seen us go after somebody like Reinders, or at least try to get a Xavi Simmons or somebody like that to put at left center mid to complement our already we have our Monums, we have our Littles, we have our Fords, we have those players. Those players are definitely necessary, but you have to get that next echelon level of player, and we haven't done that yet. So, yeah. Stuart says, let's be honest, having an actual striker in the squad will benefit us. It sure will. Space Time says Marino will soon be useless. I don't even know how he'll get minutes. Must sell ASAP, in my opinion. Funny enough, I was talking to my mom about this, and I was like, if there is one thing that I probably got wrong last summer was the impact that Marino was going to have. I think that I overestimated what he'd bring to the team, and I think the stint at striker really saved him, because I've been pretty unimpressed with the overall kind of what we've gotten from him in midfield. I think he's incredibly slow, very clumsy, and he's so slow that he can't do the things. I know he's extremely technical, but the time that he had in La Liga, that one less second means that he's losing the ball or making a bad tackle or not being able to get the shot off or the pass off or whatever. And he's just so much better up front, just like Havertz, because they touch the ball a lot less and you're not expecting them to. You want them to just take a touch and shoot. And so it's crazy, I think if I had to I love Marino, but if I could move him on this summer, I probably would. And that hurts to say, Blessing says, Russell, you're right. We do need our Stina. We need a Stina. Josh says women have great options in attack, but not so great defense, while the men's team is the opposite. Yeah, they could definitely use, they had their Saliba and Gabrielle back there. At that point, when we had Rafa, it actually was more similar to Ben White and Gabrielle, because it was a British, English plus Brazilian, but they could definitely use a couple more center backs. But make no mistake about it, McCabe she's that girl, and so is Emily Fox. They just need more center backs. They have the world-class goalkeeper. They have midfield options. They have creativity. They have all the things. But they went out there and got Russo, and I know Russo didn't score in the final, but she was, without her goals leading up to that point, we would have been fucked. So her and Mariona just makes such a big difference. So yeah, Nuances said, remember Arteta bought Marino over a center forward, then chose to wind to the board. Josh says, we don't have a Stina in the team, to be honest. She's like Origi for our team. Yeah, Stina's like the clutch goals off of the bench. So Blessing says, what's up with Amanda? I know she was on maternity leave. She's leaving the club. She's leaving the club this summer. Stuart says, season's over and we're already worrying about players getting injuries. Blaze says, Russo scored against Real Madrid when we made the comeback in the second leg. Russo is just, and what's insane is that I remember being in a group chat while Jonas was here, and I was like, Russo was struggling so bad in her first season, and I was like, are we sure we bought the right girl? Because that's how bad, how different coaching can be. You can go from people questioning whether you're that good to Golden Boot levels, Ballon d'Or levels. Coaching matters. And Jonas loved this stiff, fucked up style that didn't align with the Arsenal way. A lot of those girls play the Arsenal way. They are creative players. They love their free flowing, and Renee just allowed them to do it. And she got so much payoff from just allowing her players to do what they do best and letting them have a little bit of freedom and inspiring them to, really show up in those big moments. Jonas and Arteta remind me so much of each other in the fact that they are hell-bent on playing a style that doesn't necessarily make their players better or allow them to play at their best levels. And yeah, I don't want Arteta to suffer the same fate as Jonas, but the longer we go, the more I'm like, it's looking Jonas. It's looking Jonas. Stuart says, I almost feel like we got Marino to butter up Sociedad for Zubamendi. No one else was going to give them that good deal for Marino. I want to believe that, that Arteta is going to get more from Marino, or Marino's going to improve. He has to improve, like in terms of what he's going to give us in midfield. There's going to be less minutes for him up front this year. So, and he's going to be the backup option at left center mid if Havertz is playing up front. So I'm concerned because I don't think I really fully loved him at left center mid. I felt like, wow, this is some scary shit. He is so slow. And so I like Marino, don't get me wrong, but he's just so slow. I'm just like, what's going to happen here? So I'm hoping that he improves or gets up to speed, or maybe he just didn't have enough time in midfield. I don't know. I'm trying to hope for the best, because otherwise that was a waste of a signing. Victor says, coaching play style is super huge when it comes to player success. A good coach will take you from Hoyland to R9. And you just look at the difference between Liverpool last season and this season. I think Slot didn't do a complete overhaul or try to change the system too much. He just kind of released them of some of the pressures that they had under Klopp, which was doing all that running. I know that a lot of them wanted less of the rock and roll and they wanted to play a more controlled style, but he didn't change it to like frigid football. He just pared it back a little bit, gave them more fundamentals for the possession, and then still allowed the attack to attack and allow Salah to be a little bit more free to stay up and not do as much defensive work. And it worked for them. And sometimes it's small tweaks can have big like a big effect, and I don't think Slot he didn't like switch everything. They still looked like Liverpool, but he just made them that much better. And the difference between them and us in preseason, I know people were saying like Arsenal didn't even see Liverpool coming, but I remember being on this channel after we played Liverpool in preseason and saying, they look good, I'm scared. They look good, I'm scared, because they looked relaxed. Playing them in preseason, we looked stiff and like a little bit more worried, and they looked free. And I was just like, I'm scared, because if this is what they look like in preseason, what are they going to look like in the league? Coaching does matter. Blaze says Jonas is absolutely criminal. He really tried to destroy us again this season. Space Time says, am I the only one that thinks Nelly is on the chopping block? A left wing signing on top of Nelly and Trossard makes no sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing more of these like little kind of like, well, if a good bid comes in, Martinelli could go. They're trying to give Trossard and Martinelli new contracts, but their futures are uncertain. It's yeah, could be. Victor says, someone please tell Marino to take off the Tims when on the pitch. He takes 3 business days to turn. Russell says the girls will win a lot of trophies. I believe so too. I think they have a good chance of winning the league next season. Because if they had just fired Jonas to begin with and Renee would have started earlier, we probably would have won the league, because Chelsea were not great this season. Blessing says, I surrender. Nelly stand. It's over. I rescind my transactions and placing my stocks in the bin. His time is up. New Music says, I think Martinelli needs a new challenge. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't be that disappointed if he left. I'd love to see what Berta could get for him. 50 million would be great. So let's see. Josh says, thought we missed out on her when Man United rejected world record bid at the time. Right. I was like, but Arsenal finally did the thing that I feel like we would love the men's team to be able to do is take their best play, take like your rival's best player, basically a reverse RVP. Excuse me, a reverse RVP. You know, where we take your player and then go win something, because she said she left Arsenal to win Champions League and win trophies, and she did, you know. So I would love the men's team to be able to do that, but alas. Blaze says Renee Slager's really changed us. I didn't expect, especially from a manager who doesn't have experience. Josh says we need to be the team that ends Chelsea's reign of terror next season. Johnny says Martinelli needs to finish his on refinishing. He's not Henri. God, I mean, I think Martinelli just, for me, doesn't feel like a player that's going to get any better. I think he's reached his peak, and if this is his peak, then that's not good enough. But you know, if he was on the bench, I wouldn't mind, but he cannot be the starter in my mind. But you know, we shall see. Russell says we need to sell in order to bring in better players. I hope we don't have the sell to buy situation, you know, but if we do, you know, he would be a good player to look at, because he's somebody that I don't feel like is kind of like that hard to replace. But, you know, I'm not his biggest fan, so maybe other people feel like he's really hard to replace. Adatile says Viv Miedema couldn't win the Champions League with us. She was so salty, bro. Like, before the game, she said that she thought Barcelona would win and all this kind of stuff. And I understand that, but I'm like, I mean, yeah, I feel like she could have given us a little bit more credit. It was just weird. I think she's really salty about how things went down. I'm like, Arsenal didn't do anything to you, but Jonas did, and Jonas is gone. So you can go back to loving us, you know, but that's just me. I think she's salty. So yeah, GSM says we are so quick to dismiss our players after one season. Gravenberch would have been laughed at after his first season if he was an Arsenal player. Listen, I'm not saying that, you know, I just feel like I was a little bit disappointed by Marino. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was really like kind of like you know, I was expecting more, but you know, Gravenberch is also like 21, you know, and came from Bayern. Marino is like 28, you know, so it's not like he's the youngest either. So I don't really feel that bad about kind of like, you know, feeling like a little underwhelmed by him. And, you know, because it's not like he's like a young player. That now dismissing Calafiori, I feel like was silly. But, you know, you would expect Marino to be a little bit better than what he was, I think. Johnny says, well, Jess, another funny question from this funny Johnny guy. If you could choose just one to start every game, who would you start, Martinelli or Havertz? That's a horrendous question. But if the option was to do Martinelli, Sesko, Saka, or Nico Williams, Havertz, Saka, right? No, right? Yeah. I want whatever option means that Martinelli is not starting. I don't know. It's so hard for me. So hard. I need them both benched, but I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just too hard of a question. I feel like as much as I am not a Havertz fan, I feel like knowing that Sesko is there will give me solace when Havertz is starting. But if Martinelli is starting, I just don't know. Both. Any option is crazy. Blaze says, damn, Jess, you really don't like Martinelli. Gabby needs to be better next season if he will stay. I think I've just become like really frustrated with Martinelli, but could be different. Maybe turns back time and becomes this Nelly of old. But the Nelly of old was pretty similar to the Nelly now. It's just he was being platformed better, and you know he had more confidence. I think, you know, with Odegaard it's different because this is a completely different Odegaard than we've seen before. not similar to anything that he did before. It very much so looked like a different player. But Martinelli, it's not really a different player. It's just less confidence and not being platformed the same. So yeah. What was that, Beckham? Go see what that was. That was scary. What was that sound? Ivy says, but he scored against Real Madrid. Victor says garbage versus trash, but for real, I'd take Havertz. He's factually been one of our better attackers. Nelly can go. Ursa Major says, what happened to the shift from Gyokeres? I thought it was a done deal. I don't think it was a done deal because the people that it was coming from wasn't good information. It was coming from like Portugal and shit, and people were retweeting it and acting like it was done. I think only like 1 or 2 people were saying that they thought it was him, but most well-placed people were saying that Sesko was still in the picture. So I don't know, but things could change. Johnny says, even the dog was like Martinelli, obviously. Master Jess, no, not cool. Stuart Thomas says, Martinelli put out his season highlights reel against Real Madrid. Life of BOJ says, I watched Martinelli and I want to pull my locks and throw up. Diallo says, Jess is 100% right. I don't want to talk about this, but because I didn't see what we were talking about, I'm just going to make sure that conversation doesn't come back up. But thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Sparata says Martinelli is a filament of threat given Havertz's wages. I do think that, like Havertz, as much as I don't like him, he has been better than Martinelli recently. And Martinelli is becoming more and more of like a problem, so yeah. 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 Maybe. Yeah. Life of BOJ says, if it's not Sammy McBell or Ornstein, stop believing. Josh says, just please, before you forget, remember the 2-man midfield job Rice and Odegaard had when they played next to the Ghost of Kai in 2024, 2025. I cannot go back to that time. That time, the beginning of 2024, 2025, when, Arteta was rolling with Rice, Odegaard, and Kai, was basically a 2-man job because Kai was just like, when there was like a time where Kai played in midfield against Manchester United at the beginning of the season and he literally glitched right by the sideline and couldn't kick the ball. It was so weird. He really is really just good up front for us. I think in midfield we kind of tolerate it, but Arteta sees him as a real option there. So I'm expecting to see him there at some points next season. Jordan says, do you think if Martinelli was in a system like Barca or had a manager like Ancelotti, would he have flourished more? Well, we'll know because he'll have a manager like Ancelotti for Brazil because he got called up. But I think he would do better in a system more like what we played before where, he can get more central. I think with a different manager if Arteta never takes over and a different manager takes over, we might have a different feeling on Martinelli. I think it's all about the style that Arteta plays and the fact that because it doesn't suit Martinelli, his confidence is low and it highlights the worst parts of Martinelli, his indecision, his poor decision making, that it doesn't have great 1v1 prowess where you try to set him up for one-touch finishes in the box and you start to see a better version of Martinelli, and that's not how we utilize our left wing. So I do see a world where Martinelli goes somewhere else and looks good. And I think a lot of people will be, see, I told you so, but he will never thrive for Mikel Arteta the way that we play now. Ever. It's over. Especially since Kai does not, I think you could look at pass maps and like, I bet you Kai and Martinelli like connect with each other once or twice a game. Max. Once or twice. There's just no way. They do not have any dialogue on the pitch. Whereas Kai and Saka work really well together and he naturally like moves to that side and they connect. Because at the beginning of last season, that was working for us. Saka and Kai was working for us. But Martinelli's like off on an island by himself. I have a kind of like I don't really understand how the midfield, especially like I would like to see a pass map between Partey and Rice because I don't think they pass to each other either. I think Partey pretty much only passes to the wingers or Odegaard for the most part, but there's no connection to the left-hand side where we know that Partey and Xhaka used to pass the ball to each other, and then we know Jesus and Martinelli used to pass to each other all the time. There's no connection to the left. The left is dead. Like, it's weird. Boy says, I think Martinelli would do better at Barca because they have more creative midfielders. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Nuances says Arteta did a Grealish on Martinelli. I don't think he comes back. Arteta changed him at the crucial time of his development. Boy says, I'm disappointed with the them. You really think any striker is going to get behind Havertz in the pecking order? Not even for tactical reasons can fly. Josh says, exactly. Gabby wins over Kai every day. Mister says, to be fair, our backup forward line is Wanyeri, Havertz, and Martinelli. I take it. Yeah, I guess. It is what it is. Can we get Diaz from Liverpool? Really? You want to spend 85 million on an 85, what is it, 28-year-old, 29-year-old? Just get Nico Williams. Just put Nico Williams in the bag. Blaze says, I can't believe how a player who scored 2 years ago 15 goals in the league declined so much. It needs to be investigated. I don't actually think it's more. I don't think it's more. It's so. I feel like it's just a stylistic and system thing that doesn't, because Martinelli's always been limited. It's just a matter of how confident he is and if he's getting in the right positions to make his what he does really well shine more. Arteta doesn't. The system is not built around making players the natural things that they do well better. It's about the system, so his system is the wingers are very isolated. They kind of recycle possession, except for Saka. When he gets it, he tries to get in and do stuff, but the left wing just kind of recycles from wide positions or tries to get corners or whatever, or tries to hit crosses into the back post. None of that really suits Martinelli. Martinelli's game is about being in the box and finding space to meet, cutbacks or crosses in the penalty area. And that's not really about Martinelli being shit. It's about the system. Martinelli could go play for somebody else and they just have a situation where he's just getting balls in the box and just kind of gets to operate central and he'll be better, but at his core, he's not a player that I feel like can that he's not somebody that has a lot of tools, or a lot of things that you can utilize if the system doesn't support it. I think it's just that simple. I don't think it's about a decline necessarily, like he's gotten worse. The system has changed and his confidence has suffered as an effect of him not being as good in that system. GZ says Trossard should be the first one out. Martinelli gives you a huge pace angle. Sala says, can we ever replace Xhaka? We'll never replace him. Josh says, Gabby is a confidence player, and given the Emirates crowd is unforgiving, it's tough for such players. Let's see. Stuart says, the left side with Xhaka tucked in with an informed Zinchenko helped Martinelli a lot back then. Also, it cannot be understated how much of a benefit it was to Martinelli for Gabriel Jesus to float out to the left. Remember, when we played against Leicester in our first home game of that 2022-2023 season, and we scored those 4 goals, do you remember where Martinelli scored the goal from? He was actually more on the right-hand side and hit it with his left outside of the box. When is the last time you saw Martinelli central in zone 14, more off to the right-hand side, ready to shoot the ball with his left? Gabriel Jesus scored his goal coming from the right wing and coming central, or the left wing coming central. So having Gabriel Jesus occupy that spot out left allowed Martinelli to get into those striker positions a lot easier. Kai Havertz does not float out to the left. The left is very much so a stiff, stagnant system on that side, and nobody moves, nobody switches positions, everybody is just there. And that does not suit Martinelli at all. I have sympathy for Martinelli in that way. I have sympathy for him in that way because, you know, he just isn't in a place where we can utilize the things that he does best. It also doesn't help that we play against a deep block probably 60% of the season, 65% of the season. So you can't even utilize his pace really. That's a big reason why he just kind of needs to either be benched or sent away, because it's not so much that he's like the worst player I've ever seen in my life. It's Arteta just quite literally is not going to put things together in a way that suits him. Stewart says, yeah, Jay's with him really well. Initially, I thought Martinelli had turned a corner. Yoda says Martinelli was a 9 before Arteta got his hands on him. He was on track to be a Rashford son when switched to the left. Low IQ and limited ability, a purple patch shooter. Josh says it's sad because he doesn't even use his speed anymore. Exactly. Blessing says he was on the left, Jess, but will allow. You know what I mean? He was on the. When he scored that goal against Leicester, though, he's more on the right-hand side. He's not on the left. He's more on the right. But Gabriel Jesus did come from that left-hand side, but I mistakenly said right. Blaze says, remember very well the goal he scored versus Palace with his weak foot after he missed the penalty against Sporting. It's just, yeah, it's one of those, so yeah, I really do think that Martinelli is in a tough position. And I think Arteta just needs to be honest and be like, listen, this guy doesn't fit my system. We need to move him on, because otherwise there's no real point to have him in the squad, because actually the system suits Trossard better. And off of the bench, we know we're going to get good clutch goals from Trossard, where I'm still not 100% sure that Martinelli off the bench is going to give us what we want. So yeah, but Russell says, would you take Sané on a free? I mean, only as a plus to like the other things, but I almost feel so gross with the Sané thing, because I'm like, is it just to get somebody in the door, or do I actually really want him? On paper, that sounds really cool. Like, oh, you get Nico Williams and Sesko and Sané, and I'm like, but the reality of him is like, is he going to be able to play at the pace of the Prem? He's had quite a few injuries. He's not really the guy that he used to be. I think I'd almost rather give those minutes to Dauman and Ethan than give them to Sterling. Or sorry, it's not Sterling, Sané. So yeah, like Blessing says, Raheem Sterling, Mark II. Why are you so against Sané? We have not really had any luck with players coming from other teams and being kind of like on the downslope and still being able to hold like a good level for us. So I think that's a big reason to be against it. The wages attached to it is a good reason to be against it. And the fact that, he hasn't been in the Premier League for a while, and the Bundesliga is quite a different league. So is there not another way that we can get somebody that's a backup? Because the wages itself, even though you're not going to pay a fee, those are big wages to attach to probably a decent sized contract that he's going to want. He's not going to take a 1 year, 2 year. He's probably going to want 3, 4. So I don't know. I feel kind of like only if it's in addition to the things that we were meant to get, and it's kind of like an extra. But I feel like there's other things that we could do instead, that would be better. But I don't know. Big GZ says, please no Sané, giving Sterling vibes, especially because he desperately wants to stay at Bayern. I think having to leave Bayern and go to Arsenal and be on a big contract, I think he'd settle, and then he'd maybe not be as motivated. I don't think we need to be getting players like this anymore. Victor says, why don't we get KDB while we're at it? Let's make KDB, Sané, Sterling trio. Johnny says, yes, Sané is for the streets, the Arabic streets. Salah says, Martinelli may thrive in a Liverpool side. Big GZ says, please no Sané, giving Sterling vibes. Ify says, please no wages, and his injury record is a big no for me. Life BOJ says, he's been out of the league for so long, and that's why it should remain. And Yo-Yo says, what happened to the people who claim Arteta made Sterling and Sané? It was all hype. Well, I mean, I think we're still like, here, I want to be like maybe a little bit of a devil's advocate here, that yes, it was said that he made Sterling and Sané, but since he's been at Arsenal, he hasn't really gotten any attackers, has he? So outside of he was gifted two and he likes one and doesn't like really the other. And he hasn't really bought any attackers outside of Jesus and Trossard. I don't think he's, made Trossard any worse. I think Trossard's pretty much what he's been, and Jesus got injured, so I'm interested, which outside of all like the negativity and all that and like the Sesko of it all and is he good enough, is I am interested to see Arteta be given fresh attackers that aren't quite, if you get a Sesko and if you get a Nico Williams, you are going to be tasked with developing them. And I think this would be a bigger indication of whether or not Arteta knows how to develop and coach attack, is when he gets players that he asked for, that he knows need some development, and whether or not he can make them into the Sterling and the Sane from before. But right now it's very kind of cloudy and to me unclear whether or not he can develop attackers, because what attackers has he gotten? So yeah. Johnny says, what happened to the We Got Super Mick Arteta song? That song, I don't even remember that song that much. Josh says, Sane is a real possibility. This manager would still take Mudryk if he had the chance. Vig says, Sane is a Spursy signing. Blaze says, Sane is not the same since he left Man City. Also, he had injury, which caused him to lose a lot of pace. I don't want him. Victor says, why? Oh, yeah, no, I read that one already. Yeah, I'm leaning towards no on the Sane. I just feel like it's repeating the same mistake. I want fresh players without any sort of like attachment to City. The only player that I would take that had an attachment to City is Julian Alvarez, because obviously he's special. What is this? PSG are open to trimming their bloated attack with the sale of winger Bradley Barcola, according to El Nacional. Arsenal, Newcastle, and Tottenham Hotspur are all interested in a deal that would cost over 50 million euros, 41 million pounds. There's no way that's the fee. That's the one thing I really don't believe. And also it's El Nacional. So, but what a signing that would be. Out of the three teams there, we would be the best team for him to go to. Yeah. Now, when it comes to, I love Nico Williams. He's my number one option outside of Rodrigo, but Barcola is probably just a step ahead, So, yeah, the source is El Nacional, so don't take it too serious. Big says, if Rodrigo goes to Club World Cup, he's likely staying at Madrid. If we are going for him, it needs to be now. We should be in for Barcola 100%. Blaze says, Barcola for 50 million, I will take. I can't imagine them selling him for that little, because didn't they buy him for more? Or around the same? So I don't know, but yeah, that'd be great, So yeah, Barcola has frightening speed. So yeah, I'm taking that. Victor says, jump on that if it's true. It isn't. Period. It's it's not true, or at least I don't think the fee is true. For sure. The fee throws me off a lot, because I just feel like they could get so much more. Because I would say go up to at least, you can go up to 70 million for him, and I would say that it was worth it. But yeah, man. Barcola is a baller. Marcus says, I'm surprised PSG doesn't have a buyback for Ekitike. Do you think that a player that was at a club like PSG and they don't have a buyback and they were willing to get rid of him so kind of easily is a player that we should be like desperate to get for like 80 million? I don't know. Ekitike for me is like, they were so okay with letting him go. Yo-Yo says, what happened to the Spanish guy he was on about earlier this season? Alex Baena? Alex Baena is probably going to end up at Atletico Madrid. That's the perfect place for him to end up. I think he adds creativity to them. He can stay in La Liga. But Alex Baena is just another idea of Fabio Vieira. I think I like those types of players. I love a player that can pick a pass, and we don't have many of them. So, which is why I was kind of desperate for Fabio to stay. But yeah, I love Alex Baena. I think going to Atletico Madrid, though, really suits him. And then I think the other player that I really like, Alberto Malero, who I think Las Palmas did get relegated, he will end up replacing Alex Baena at Villarreal. So that's how that's going to work, which makes sense because I wanted both of those players to play for Arsenal in the same position. So Alex Baena will go to Atletico Madrid. Arsenal said they bought him for 45 million euros according to Transfer Market. So what's that, about like 37 million pounds. So maybe, yeah, they would sell him for 50. Big says Ekitike is not that great. He's massively underperforms his XG, misses chances. He will frustrate you. He's just French Jesus. Boy says PSG casts a wide net for talent. They've now selected the best of them and are now in a UCL final after adding Kvaratskhelia the final piece. Marco says, I prefer Sesko to Ekitike. If you hear Liverpool fans talking, though, it sounds like they think they're getting Isak if they buy Ekitike. Good. Let them keep thinking that. Because we talk about Isak being a baby Henry, but if you ever watched Henry in real life, you know that that's just not, he's not even anywhere near the levels that Henry was on. And so you've already diluted that down. If you're getting a baby Isak, then what are you really getting? You know, so he misses a lot of chances. He is underperforming his XG quite a bit. And when you do that, I feel like you're pretty much Jesus, but the aesthetics make it look better. And that's fine. You know, I think the better person was Marmoush. I think if you got away with Marmoush, you got the good one. I think you should stay away from Ekitike. Johnny says, in my opinion, we have the 100% behind the team. No negativity, none until we have reasons to, because at the end of the season, we will implode if we don't win. So why not give us a chance to win? Well, I feel like the only player that I didn't do a good job of getting behind because I just couldn't was Havertz, but I really tried not to like hate him. You know, I had to like, you know what I mean? But I just know that there's just no way. There's just no way it's not going to get ugly. If we don't start off like a house on fire, they're going to be having emergency meetings every week. You know, every day, emergency meeting, emergency meeting, emergency meeting, emergency meeting. And so I don't think we're in a position now, you know, where we can expect anything other than complete panic every time we lose a game, every time we draw, every time, you know, when the window closes, no matter what we get, there'll be some sort of level of panic. I just think it's expected now. You know, I just don't see a world where it doesn't end up that way, you know? But yeah, like Sesko's expected goals this season is 10, and he overperformed his XG by three goals. You know, so he overperforms his XG. He goes over his XG while somebody like Ekitike underperforms. People think underperforming your XG is a positive because you're like, oh, well, eventually he'll just become clinical. No, he won't. I'd rather have somebody that does better with a lot less than somebody that still is getting served in a good team. Frankfurt were better than Leipzig, and they play to Ekitike's strengths, and he is underperforming, you know, so I don't like that. Last season, Sesko's XG was 7, and he overperformed it by quite a bit. He scored 14. So that's overperforming his XG by half. So in 2 seasons running, he overperforms his XG. Like, then that's what players like Kane do, you know? Players like Harry Kane, which to me, he's, you know, I can say this now that he's not a Spurs player, but, you know, he's kind of, to me, the template of what a good striker is, you know? And Kane consistently overperforms his XG. You know, this season he had 20 XG, he scored 26 goals. Last season he had 30 XG. He scored 36. The season before he had 20 XG, he scored 30. So I just feel like a good striker probably overperforms their XG, not underperforms. Big says it's genuinely concerning that we have not been linked seriously to a left wing. And I'm not talking about Nico Williams link, like no information from Ornstein or McBell regarding a potential left wing. I hear that. Blessing said behind the team, but there's a level of expectation now that can't be underperformed. And underperforming, or not underperforming, but like having the expectations and then being underwhelmed and then criticizing, to me is different, or being critical is different than starting off the season where you are ready to panic right away, and I'm just, if the window is not good enough, I will criticize it, but I wanted at least give it time to get going. I want to at least give it a fair shot. And players that are coming in from other leagues, my expectation is going to be that they need time to adapt. And so if they're not perfect right off the bat, I'm not going to write them off. Johnny says, yeah, Jess, you are the opposite of Dean Potts, just like me. XG is extremely relevant to judge the ability of a player to score. To put him up front or not, it's paramount statistic, XG via scoring. I think XG is really good to look at for a goal scorer to see, okay, they're getting chances, but are they taking advantage of them? And if they get low quality chances, can they turn them into good chances? Like a chance, a 0.3, like a 0.3 chance is hard for a player like Jesus to score, but it's probably not that hard for somebody like Kane because he has the ability to make half chances into full chances. And that's what I look for, especially with an attacker that is going to come into a system that is not necessarily super free flowing. And in some games, you are going to have less chances. I need you to be able to work with less than need so much and still fuck up. And XG is not really something that I look at in terms of like, oh, we were so good in the game, oh, we had more XG than so-and-so, so we were actually better. I actually think it's just much better for just individual attackers. And if Kane and Lewandowski and players like that consistently overperform their XG, you probably want an attacker that does the same. Ruak says, Ornstein said multiple Arsenal after two attackers, said multiple times that we were after multiple attackers. Mr. Mister says, thing about left wing, we have to remember this window is long. There's no rush as long as it happens at some point. Blessing said, I gave Nelly so much time. I like to give players at least a season to truly settle in, but now we're in win now mode, so we have to make sure we maximize the window. Big says Delap for 30 million is such a smart signing, similar profile to Kane, and also gives them more than enough budget to sign a big name player. Should have gone for him instead of we got 29. Shake my head. We got 29. We haven't. I mean, oh, you mean we should have went for him, like instead of Sesko? I'm sorry. I'm gonna call bullshit because if we had gotten or been linked to Delap or got Delap or anything, you guys would be having a heart attack. There's just no way that it is a smart signing for Chelsea, especially because they want to probably go for multiple strikers, but I do not believe for a second that you guys wouldn't be spitting up blood if we got linked with Delap. I'm not saying that he's a bad player. I actually think he's quite a good player, but let's be honest. Let's not be dishonest, but Delap is a good player. I think what Delap gives them is a baseline for goal scoring. I think because Nico Jackson is such a poor goal scorer, and he misses so many chances, that they want a baseline where they know that they have a Premier League level striker that they know that they're going to get at least this from. And then they can get somebody more risky like Ekatike. I think that's what they probably will try to do, but we'll see. Yo-Yo says Kai is 29 is Kai. I know that, but saying that we should have gone for Delap when we've had Kai for 2 seasons, you wouldn't have been going for Delap because we got Kai we've had Kai for 2 seasons. We got him 2 summers ago. So I get what you're saying, but it's like, what does going for Delap this summer have to do with Kai Havertz? I think Personally, I still think Sesko is the one for the next couple of years. I don't think Delap is gonna end up being one of the best, but that's just me. IP says, but those are different seasons. Exactly. Yeah, I'm like, I don't think it really is relevant. But yeah, Josh says Delap would be a good signing along with Gyokeres. Yeah, I think you have to get multiple strikers with the Delap signing. Boy says sell Havertz for 29 million. It's poetic. Johnny says, well, Delap in Romanians means furniture, which such a name. I am not the most concerned person in the world. He'll score goals for them. Stuart says, personally, I think Chelsea hoover up talent to stop other teams from strengthening. Somebody is watching. Stuart is watching. He gets it. Stuart gets it. Chelsea saw a good player available for cheap, and they'll bring him in. They have no problem scooping up lots of talent because they'll just sell them. They have a good reputation in the market. So, yeah. Oh, Gasparini is leaving Atalanta to go to Roma, which he was supposed to go to Juve. What's going on? Because they're saying that Inzaghi is going to go to Saudi. Inzaghi to Saudi. Conte stays. Gasparini to AC Milan. Where is Ranieri going? What's happening? Blessing says Stoke away as was hell. Blessing said that name shouldn't ever be associated with Arsenal. Yo-Yo says understood. Saeed says Mikel was high when he signed Kai. Ben says I agree, but the issue is that we are stuck with Havertz and he's our highest earner, which certainly has an impact on recruitment. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Allegri to Milan, exactly. It's just a lot of shit going on over there. Mohammed says Zubi, Sesko, and Bomo, Saliba backup, Raya backup, extend Saliba, Gabriel Saka, rate the window. No left wing, not a great window. Cannot back that window. You need to switch in Bomo with a left winger, and then it's good to me. I would take the left winger, Sesko, Zubi, cheap Saliba backup, a backup goalkeeper. You need the left winger, right? And Bomo is a player that is an extra addition to a left wing and a striker to me. Wayland says managers in Serie A switch teams like speed dating. Blessing said, and he's now low for thinking about signing Sesko. Musan says, as someone said earlier, Arteta will turn Sesko into an 8. Johnny says, well, I shut down any Chelsea fans when I see them. They played one game a week last year, and one first team was sleeping when real teams played real football matches and real European competitions. Fuck off. Mr. Mister says Mbomo will go to Newcastle. I do think Mbomo will end up at Newcastle, and he should go there. He deserves to be in a Champions League team, and stooping to Manchester United would be beneath him. Kyle's Corner says, I still think we need a backup number 10. We can't have one reliable 10 in the squad. Agree with that. Saeed says, I was going to clean my room until I got Kai. Okay. I get what you're doing there. Yo-Yo says, does Sesko take free kicks and pens for club and country? I know he takes pens and he does well with the pens. I'm not sure about the free kicks, to be fair. Yeah. Blessing says Mbomo, Isak, Gordon is genuinely better than our front three. I think that's harsh, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't really rate Gordon that highly. I think it all depends on who we get left wing. Because you have a modified front line based on who they've signed. We haven't signed our people. So right now that's better than what we have. But if we added a different left wing and a new striker, I don't think it's that much better than ours. Mata says, dang, we don't even have one reliable number 10. No shade, Odie Jess. Fair enough. Diallo says, guys, please clean your rooms. Let's keep it PG. Marco says, Jess, I watched Don yapping again about his midfield being better than ours. We freaking played them twice. It was so embarrassing. Timber had to tell the coach to try harder. Is Don real? I don't know. I don't look at midfields from like just a perspective of on paper. I think, personally, I think their midfield is really good, and I don't think that there's a big gap between the two of them. But I can't really rate a midfield that doesn't have good performances against big teams. They can do pretty well against the smaller teams, but there was a 10-game period of time this season where they really struggled to kind of beat the smaller teams and they weren't really controlling games. And I get that, like, I think that their players individually have more hype than ours, and that's fine. But whenever it's like they have those players and we play against them and they never dominate us, they don't really dominate City. They don't, it's outside of like Man United. It's like, who are they really beating for real? Wi-Fi codes and shit. So, yeah, I think, you know, they're really, really good, but he takes things like, oh, well, the statistics say that we build up through our midfield more, so it's better. Oh, the individual stats of Enzo are better than, Odegaard or whoever, so it's better, blah, blah. Fair enough. And my whole thing is, I may not think your midfield is better than ours, and you may think that your midfield is better than ours, but at some point it's just an opinion, and like everybody has opinions, so we don't have to like keep going at it. Um, Especially when you say something like, I think Aston Villa's midfield is better than Liverpool's, say it with a straight face and then put it a poll on Twitter and say that you think that everybody will believe you or agree with you. And then it ends up being the case that most football fans think that Liverpool's midfield is better than Aston Villa's, which is like a normal thing to think. But it's okay. We all have opinions, and he's allowed. Kyan says, yeah, I don't know how to sit through these podcasts with people like Don. To be honest, I had to turn it off. I mean, he had been waiting to try to get me for about a couple months, so it was pent up, so yeah. It's all fun and games. Like, we have so much fun on that channel. So yeah. Mohammed says, is Newcastle's midfield better than ours? I think Newcastle's midfield is better than Aston Villa's. I think it's better than Chelsea's. And I do think it's better than ours. I do think it's better than ours. I think their midfield, when I watch their games, their midfield does dominate games, and their midfield has dominated big teams. It's not just all flash and about, GA all the time. Sometimes it's just you watch with your eyes. Newcastle's midfield, to me, it doesn't have the flashier players. They have Tonali and Bruno and Joe Linton, but they're a formidable group. Now, when our midfield is playing well, it's better than ours. When our midfield is like it is this season, yeah, I think a lot of these conversations and these comparisons are also coming off of the back of a really poor season for Odegaard, and probably like a kind of like a slow early season to Rice. I think last season you wouldn't be saying this stuff. So I still rate our midfield. I think it could be better, but ultimately I think the only midfields that I know for sure we're not touching are Liverpool and Cities. We're just not touching them. Vig says Newcastle's midfield is better than ours for this season only, not last season. To me, that midfield, I look at the way that the midfield functions and how they complement each other, not the individuals and the hype and how much you paid for them. I think Chelsea's midfield is good because of the individuals, but when they play together, they're always like, this doesn't work. Enzo needs to be back. So-and-so needs to be here, blah, blah, blah. What about Lavia? And if Cole Palmer is not in the right position, being fed in the right way, he's useless against big teams. He doesn't have any big performances against big teams, does he? So I think Newcastle's midfield is probably the next best after like Liverpool and Cities, and then ours is somewhere in there, and then it's like Villa and Chelsea. But then that could all change. Diallo says that's where we need to upgrade massively. Boy says our midfield's better than City's, even with Rodri fit. I don't know if I agree. Osman says PGML allows teams with reputations as tough to get the foul all day without repercussions. Let's see Newcastle's midfield play with our whistle. And by the way, let's see them face 38 low blocks a year. Let's see. Saeed says Zubi makes this balance. If we had a core four midfield, Zubi, Rice, Odegaard, and like a Xavi Simons, you wouldn't hear shit from me. That is a good core four midfield that can go toe-to-toe with pretty much anybody else, because if you take Odegaard out and you put Xavi Simons and you play Rice and Zubi, or you play Zubi with just Odegaard and Xavi Simons against deep blocks, or you put Rice in there with Xavi, like there's so many different options, and you can get more technical, you can control tempo. There's just so many things you can do. Without that other profile, I feel like we're just missing something. and it's the ability to get more creative and have incisive passes on the left. We don't have that, and I'm not quite sure why we're so desperate not to get that freaking profile. Saeed says, Eze, I'd take Eze too. I think he'd elevate the midfield too. Johnny says, three top midfields are Liverpool, Arsenal, City. Just, you know why? Because only those three teams can sustain the two best competitions in the same time at high levels. All the others flopped in both. Mohammed says City's midfield is just Rodri and De Bruyne if fit. How is it better than ours? I just feel like it's hard to ignore. Maybe just this season we were better, but it's marginal because we know that our midfield, from an individual standpoint and the way that it works together, hasn't really been that great this season. But I kind of get what you guys are saying, but saying like it's just Rodri and De Bruyne when fit is kind of like dismissive to two of the best players in the league, you know. So, but I kind of get what you guys are saying. That's where we need to upgrade. I saw that. Zuby makes this more balanced. Willow says Newcastle is best in the Premier League. Mata says Newcastle's midfield is techie bruisers. They got it. Josh says Newcastle have the most balanced midfield. I think their midfield is very balanced. I think you don't even have like a normal, like that's the thing. It's like nobody says that Newcastle lack creativity, but they don't have a number 10. You don't have to have a number 10 to have creativity. It's all about the attackers that you have. And unfortunately, they have unfortunately, they have attackers that you can give the ball to and they just put the ball in the back of the net. It's not like, you know, they have a number 10 that's really knitting it together all the time. Bruno kind of comes forward and like does some of the creativity, but most of the time it's just about shuffling the ball quickly in good positions to Isak and Gordon and those players, you know? And we don't have that. We don't have attackers that can take responsibility for a game. We really have to rely upon our midfield to be insanely creative and also score a shit ton of goals. Blessing says, I don't understand the Xavi Simons thing. He's a 10, and knowing how Arteta plays, how would he fit into our system? Arteta would have to change the system. And so, like, if you can't get a Xavi Simons type of player, you don't want to change your system to allow that type of player to thrive on the left-hand side of attacking mid, then you'd have to do something more like a Reinders, you know, who would fit perfectly in a team that has 2 8s and a 6, which is essentially what we play now. But Arteta doesn't want a player that gets on the ball, I guess, in that position. Johnny says, actually, I have to revise my predictions for this season. Chelsea and Newcastle have to contend with 2 games a week at high intensity. It's going to be tremendously hard for them to retain 5th and 6th. Blaise says, to be fair to Bruno and Tonali, they are the reason why Newcastle had creativity in midfield. I'm not saying that they're not creative. I'm just saying that we have like this very kind of like rigid way of thinking about midfields, and we need a 10, we need a 10, we need a 10. Tonali and Bruno are not necessarily creative midfielders, but they provide those attackers with provide for them in good positions. I think it's about how fast they pass the ball. I think it's about their ability to make risky passes. And then they have runners. Gordon and Isak are runners, and they can also trust to get the ball to them in good positions, and they put the ball in the back of the net. You don't have to have players that are on 15 goals and 15 assists in midfield when you have good attackers. You know, it makes it so much easier on the midfield. Let's actually look at Bruno G. Bruno G, since he's been at Newcastle, has been one of the best midfielders in the league every single season, whether we look at him or not. These are Bruno Guimaraes' numbers, by the way. This season, he had 5 goals and 6 assists. Last season, he had 7 goals and 8 assists. The season before, he had 4 goals and 5 assists. You know, and since Tonali came in this season after his ban, he hasn't had to play the 6. So even pushing him forward, 5 goals and 6 assists is a type of return that if our players had, we'd choke. You don't have to have a number 10 to be creative in midfield. You need movement, you need good attackers, you need incisive passing, and you need to be able to take those risks. Newcastle also don't play against deep blocks, which helps them, but yeah. Mohammed says, can Rice be coached into Reinders level 8? No. Big says, swear down, just checked on AFTV Live. Men are saying Gyokeres is better without having to watch him. They don't consider that he's transition threat or plays against weak defense. I feel like anybody that makes an argument for Gyokeres that doesn't even mildly consider the league that he plays in or the fact that he doesn't naturally fit in our system, I think you have to put that into context. I think you have to put that out there, that it's not a 100% slam dunk, but AFTV just want somebody that has the numbers. So yeah, it is what it is. Like I don't expect anything different from AFTV because they usually only want players that have height or the numbers or whatever. I don't think they really look at where they play, how that team plays, conversion rates or anything like that. I think they just kind of look at, okay, striker, goals, it's going to be fine. That kind of thing. It's fine. OGN says, why can't Gyokeres adapt? I'm not saying Gyokeres can't adapt, but he needs to adapt, so I think the idea that he plugs straight in and hits the ground running doesn't take into account that there might be an adaptation period from the league, and there also might be an adaptation period from a system perspective. So I'm not saying he can't adapt, but also there's adaptation for both players. I think people are presenting Gyokeres as a slam dunk, going to hit the ground running, perfect, is not going to have any trouble getting into this league or the system, and Sesko is going to instantly fail, when there is a chance that both of them need adaptation, both of them need time to get used to the league and the system. Pretending like there won't be any adaptation for Gyokeres is my problem. Keenan says Eze is the one player that can play 8 and still have creativity in the 10. I like Eze because he doesn't make us lightweight. I think one of the problems that we have with our midfield is that if you put a creative midfielder on the left, they're, it makes you a little bit more lightweight, because if you have like Xavi and Odegaard, maybe that's too light. But Eze can get down. Like, he's the type of player that's not going to get knocked off the ball, that can carry from deep. He's somebody that if you receive the ball at the center circle, you wouldn't be afraid that he loses the ball there. If he's under pressure, he can carry, he can create, he can score free kicks, he can do all of it. Eze is a serious player that should be playing for a top 4 team. And if it's not us, I am going to be upset, because I feel like that's an easy signing to make. But yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I know this is a super long stream, but I feel like it's okay though, because people come in and out, and then people don't feel like they missed the live stream, and then, it's fine, and it's Friday. But yeah, make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel on your way out. Make sure you guys, get in the comments after and let me know what you thought about the stream. If something happens with Sesko or Gyokeres or something, we'll definitely go live again. But we need to, just hold on before we get totally negative, because we haven't even signed the players yet, So yeah, but like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.